Beep boop doop boop boop. Bow, beep doop bow. Hey there, friends. Hey there. Who's ready to talk about some House Targaryen? I am. I've got my Game of Thrones hybrid sigil going on. It's half Targaryen, just like Jon Stark. I mean Snow. I mean Targaryen. I mean, what's his name? We don't know. We don't know. We're here to talk about three particular members of House Targaryen who will be, of course, featuring in House of the Dragon. We've got what am I talking about? Rhaenyra, Viserys I, and Daemon. Those are your three. Rhaenys, the queen who never was, will also get a mention, but we covered her mostly on the House Velaryon stream, of course. So we'll just mention her tangentially, but we're going to be focusing on Rhaenyra, Daemon, and Viserys, our three Targaryens. We'll mention their kids, but we're going to do a whole separate stream for the younger generation of kids. So this will be mostly focusing on our elder Targaryens. And we can't talk about those elder Targaryens without talking about the generation that came before. So friends, welcome. Check out my new logo. There it is. Yes. It's just the House of the Dragon on my old logo, but it looks kind of snappy. And, of course, the House of the Dragon logo, the Targaryen logo, does have 4 feet. You can only see 3 there because it's in silhouette, but we're back to 4-legged dragons with wings, which is 6 appendages. After George made such a big deal of saying that, dragons should only have 2 wings and 2 legs, but there it is. That's what they did. So, friends, I've got a new video coming out this week called Meet the Dragons. Meet the Dragons. Are you a pothead dragon? Yes, I am. Flying high in the sky. So yeah, we got a short video coming out either on Tuesday or Wednesday. It's going to be a rundown of all the dragons that we're going to see in the first season of the show. And no, I'm not going to release a theme song. I have to keep it fresh for when I need a timeout break during my live streams. If I let y'all wear it out, then when I have to take a timeout and I hit the play button, you're going to be like, oh, this again. So no, I got to keep it fresh. So yeah, new video coming out this week. It's going to be a rundown of all the dragons and dragon riders that we'll see in the first season. So look forward to that. That's going to be about 25 minutes. About 25 minutes. It's coming your way. And HBO actually released sneak peek of the video. Yes, I've got my Dragon LML gear back on. But as you can see, HBO actually released 11 different promo pictures with 11 different eggs. So we'll be getting into the dragons that we'll be seeing in the first season in that one. But today, we're here to talk about these fine folks. Like I said, Rhaenys Targaryen, Viserys Targaryen, Daemon Targaryen, and Rhaenyra. But we can't talk about them, as I mentioned, without talking about the generation that came before. And really, we're talking about the children of Jaehaerys. These folks, excepting Rhaenyra, the older 3, these are all grandchildren of Jaehaerys. And of course, Rhaenyra is Viserys' daughter. But these are the grandchildren of Jaehaerys and Alysanne, pictured here. And I've got the art credited below, but in case anyone can't read, that's Urtak on the right. No, that's not Urtak. That is totally not. That is wrong. That is a wrong caption. Let me just see who that is. That's probably Magali Villanueva. Is it? Yep, sure is. That's Magali Villanueva on the right. And all the black and white drawings that you'll see today are Doug Wheatley, and those are from Fire and Blood, of course. So the generation that came before, talking about these folks. Aemon Targaryen, Balon Targaryen, the Spring Prince, Alyssa Targaryen, and Daela Targaryen. So these are the 4 children of Jaehaerys who had kids, rather. And we'll get into all that. So welcome, everyone, to the House Targaryen preview. If you have questions or comments, of course, or if you want to support the program, you can do that 2 different ways. You can use the PayPal function, which is linked in the description below. If you're feeling generous, that's the best way. I get to keep pretty much all the proceeds that way. Super Chat is also good go through YouTube. YouTube takes a little cut, but it's not really a big deal. Don't want you to worry about that. If that's more fun for you, feel free to do that. I appreciate all your support and comments. It's possible if you do a super chat or PayPal, I will be storing them up and then answering them at little breaks and stuff. So do not fret if you send one in, it doesn't get answered right away. I've got Minty taking them down in a dock so that I can see them. But I'll jump on them when I can. So that's what's going on. And where's my... there we go. Need my mute button handy. So the House Targaryen preview. This is going to be fun, folks. Of course, last week we separated all the Velaryon stuff out from the Fire and Blood chapter. But basically what we're discussing is the events of the 20 years or so, 30 years really, leading up to the dance. No reading Rhaegar today. Oh, thanks for mentioning reading Rhaegar. Reading Rhaegar will be back next week to host a very special Easter live stream. We'll be doing another dragon trivia. We did a dragon egg trivia last Easter. It was super fun. And we're going to do it even better this year. So it'll be Fire and Blood trivia this year. Oh, lots of dragon-related trivia from Fire and Blood. So, yeah. And yes, today we will be covering stuff from Fire and Blood. Absolutely. I would be reading large chunks of the chapter which leads up to the dance. But I've cut out all the superfluous stuff. Some of the stuff that we covered already I put into bullet points. So yeah, next week it'll be a trivia, and I figured out a better way to do the trivia too. I'm going to put the questions in the chat because some people get behind on the visual stream, and it gives them a disadvantage to answer the questions if the questions are coming out of my mouth box and through the streaming. However, the chat is always the same for everyone, so even if you get behind on the video, the chat is current. So what we'll do with the trivia is I'll put the questions in the chat, and that way everyone they'll get them at exactly the same moment, and then the first answer in the chat that's right will be the winner, and we'll do at least 20 or more, and we'll keep a tally and see if somebody can come out on top. So, yeah, we had lots of fun last time, so I've already been brainstorming trivia questions. Lord Luke Lightbringer says, you mentioned the Lines of Loch Lamora. Are you planning to make a video about that series? Maybe if guy puts out another book. There's another fantasy series that's totally stalled where we haven't had a book in like years and years. But yeah, if they do another Loch Lamora, I would be happy to cover that. I really enjoyed that, and they're just getting into the deeper world building in that second book. Also, I started watching Raised by Wolves. A lot of you guys have been telling me to do that. Really good show. Thanks for the recommendation. I'm 5 episodes into season 1, so I'll probably make a video about that after I'm done with season 1. Just to give my thoughts. Definitely some Garden of Eden mythology and cool stuff going on. And yeah, so here's what I was thinking, guys. There's a bunch of TV shows that I like. Dark, Watchmen, there's a few others. And instead of trying to cover shows that are already over and make like one video for each episode, I was thinking about doing like one overall stream to talk about some of these other shows. Dark, Raised by Wolves, whatever. I'll do an outline so I have my thoughts organized, and then do like one stream presentation, because there's just not enough money and like demand for tons and tons of dark videos or something like that. So I'd like to do one just for you guys and to talk about the things I love about it, but it's not something that like, we can take the channel in this direction now. We'll be covering House of the Dragon mostly over the next couple months, it seems like. And House of the Dragon, of course, just meaning Fire and Blood. Yeah. But yeah, as far as branching out, yeah, I was thinking if I could basically just put together an outline of my thoughts and then do like one stream to sort of talk about the show in sum, that might be a cool extra thing that wouldn't screw it up. Yeah, so Dark, Watchmen, when I get done with Raised by Wolves. So they're on in the middle of season 2, right? I got to catch up. So in any case, let's talk about House Targaryen. That's enough yada, yada, yada. Sorry, guys. There's always that one angry commenter. The stream actually starts at 6 minutes and 42 seconds. But bless you. Thanks for watching and commenting. It still helps. All right. So, friends, I've got the notes up on the screen. I've got the chat. And by the way, I saw somebody remark that, like, oh, if the chat's on the screen, now I feel nervous about what I'm typing because it's forever. Well, the chat is always forever anyway, in case you didn't know. When you rewatch a live stream, you can rewatch the chat. So anything you type in the chat is forever. So think carefully before you type. All right. So as I mentioned, Jaehaerys and Alysanne, they started this whole thing. They did. Even though they're great king and queen, they sowed the seeds for this. And we read this paragraph last time, but it's such a good intro to the dance that we're going to read it again. So the seeds of war are oft planted during times of peace. So it has been in Westeros. The bloody struggle for the Iron Throne, known as the Dance of the Dragons, fought from 129 to 131 AC, after the conquest, had its roots half a century earlier, during the longest and most peaceful reign that any of the conqueror's descendants ever enjoyed, that of Jaehaerys I Targaryen, the Conciliator. The old king and good queen Alysanne ruled together until her death in 100 AC, aside from 2 periods of estrangement, and produced 13 children. 4 of them, 2 sons and 2 daughters, grew to maturity, married, and produced children of their own. That's the key. There's a couple other kids that grow to maturity, like Archmaester Vaemond, but only 4 have kids. And it said, never before or since had the 7 kingdoms been blessed or cursed with so many Targaryen princelings. From the loins of the old king and his beloved queen sprang such a confusion of claims and claimants that many maesters believe the dance of the dragons or some similar struggle was inevitable. So the 2 things that are happening with the Jaehaerys and Alysanne's reign is they just have a lot of kids. And then the king lives a long time. So by the time he dies, we've got kids and grandkids and cousins. There's just a lot of people, a lot of claimants. The other problem is that they're consistently, Jaehaerys is denying the claims of female claimants in favor of male claimants, which sets up the whole dispute with Rhaenyra and Aegon later. So these 4 kids who grew up to have kids, they're the ones that I mentioned at the beginning. So the first one is Aemon. Aemon he's the 3rd born child, but the firstborn son that lived. And he's the rider of Caraxes. I'm not going to talk about the dragons today too much because, again, I've got a dragon video coming on Tuesday or Wednesday. But Aemon he was the first rider of Caraxes. He married Jocelyn Baratheon in 70 AC, and they had Rhaenys, the queen who never was. And that, of course, is a very important character, as we know. And here's a picture of Prince Aemon with young Prince Rhaenys and Caraxes. Or I guess this would be Meleys. So, introducing young Rhaenys, the queen who never was, to her dragon. It's a very cute picture by Sofia Golovanova. And, of course, there's grown-up Rhaenys on the right, the actress that plays her in the show. So, Aemon is very competent. He is the Master of Laws at 26. He was attorney champ. He was knighted. So there's, actually, that's Balon. Let me go back. Sorry, this is Aemon, and there is Caraxes. So he's a very promising young prince. Looks like he's going to be a great king. Of course, he dies young. We'll get to that in a minute. So then we've got Balon Targaryen, Aemon's brother. This fella here. This is by Paparinka art. And on the right is Vhagar by Urtak. And Balon does ride Vhagar. He's the 4th born, the 2nd son, rides Vhagar. He's knighted at 16. And he and Aemon, they were best bros. Now, then comes the third Targaryen that we're going to talk about, which is Alyssa Targaryen. And Alyssa and Balon, well, they married each other because they're Targaryens, and we do incest here. So they get married, and Alyssa is born in 60 AC, as you can see. She rides Meleys, the Red Queen, who later will be ridden by Rhaenys, the queen who never was. And so in 75 AC, Balon and Alyssa get married, and they have 2 children who are Viserys and Daemon. And that would be, and here's Alyssa and Meleys, by the way. And Alyssa is drawn by Paparinka art again. Meleys is by Jordi Gonzalez. And so here we have Balon and Alyssa. And their two children, Viserys on the left, the older child, and Daemon on the right. And of course, Viserys and Daemon are two of our most important Targaryens in the show. So Balon and Alyssa are their parents. And it's just very important to understand the framework of the family tree from Jaehaerys down here. So you got these firstborn son, Aemon. He gives birth to Rhaenys, the queen who never was. Then we have Balon and Alyssa get married, and they give us Viserys and Daemon. Then we have Daella Targaryen. Daella's a little bit of a sad story. She is young, and she gets married young. She's a little bit simple, or maybe she probably has like a learning disability. She has trouble reading and memorizing stuff. And Alysanne kind of dotes on her. She's famously very afraid of everything. Like, she likes cats, and then her kitten scratches her one time, and then she's afraid of cats, and she's afraid of loud noises, and she's just very easily spooked. So she is married. She marries Roderick Arryn. And basically what happens here is this is actually the cause of the first fight between Jaehaerys and Alysanne. Jaehaerys basically demands that Daella get betrothed. And so at 16, she's forced to choose between a wide number of people. She chooses Roderick Arryn, who's much older than her, because Roderick is a gentle and a sweet man, and she reminds her of her father, Jaehaerys. So you have this relationship with an older Roderick Arryn and a younger Daella. And at 18, Daella gives birth to Aemma Arryn, but dies in childbirth. And this is why Alysanne is angry, because she feels like Jaehaerys forced her to get married too young, and that led to these potential complications. So this is an issue, but the main thing is that Aemma Arryn is born from this. And Aemma Arryn, of course, will be the wife of Viserys, as you can see on the right. King Viserys I and Queen Aemma. So that is our introduction of our, if you will, our introduction of, these characters here. So now we get to our main characters. Oh, Cleo. All right, let me go get the bird, guys. Hang on one second. I'll give you what you want. I'll give you the funky music, and Cleo's not having it today, so I'll be right back. And let me see the Cleo emojis in the chat. For those of you who are channel member squishers and have access to the Cleo emoji. And let me get, Garth the Green emojis. That's not what was happening, but anytime I take a break, that's welcome too. So here we are. First up, Rhaenys, the queen who never was. As I mentioned, we already talked about Rhaenys a bit. Quite a bit last time. So we will not belabor the point. But Rhaenys was the firstborn of this next generation. Because again, her dad is Aemon. Aemon is the the oldest of Jaehaerys. So Rhaenys born in 74. She rides Meleys, the Red Queen, of course. And there's Meleys. And with a glad cry and a crack of her whip is a very famous phrase from a very famous dragon fight with the queen, Rhaenys, who never was. So that's what you're looking at here. This is the glad cry and the crack of the whip. And there's Meleys. And this is by Ricardo Bessa. So she marries Corlys Velaryon, of course, as we know, in 90 AC. And from their loins spring Laena and Rhaenys Velaryon, who are not pictured. But of course, they're right here. Laena is on the far right, and Rhaenys is in the middle. And they've been cast at multiple ages. So we will see a lot of them in season 1. And they're born in 92 and 94. But like I said, we already talked about her. So let's get to the Targaryens that we need to talk to. King Viserys. Oh, thanks for reminding me. I don't have quad box up. There we go. There we go. I was describing art you couldn't see, so I will go back for that. This is Rhaenys and Meleys. So many YS names by Ricardo Bessa. So this is the glad cry and a whip. Thanks for letting me know there. I've got screen mute and microphone mute to worry about. I'm walking and talking and chewing gum, people. All right, so like I said, here is, let me go back. We've seen this picture before, but this is, of course, Laena on the far right and Rhaenys in the middle. So those are the children of Corlys and Rhaenys. So those 4, that's your family right there. On the far left is Vaemond. And by the way, let me just throw out a little something about the Velaryons that I learned over this week. So in the books, Vaemond Velaryon is a cousin of Corlys. However, they have changed it so that Vaemond is now the brother of Corlys. And this, to me, is more evidence that, in fact, it's Corlys's mom or parents that are going to be black, not all of House Velaryon. And this is what some people were wondering at first. If they try to make it so that all of House Velaryon has always been black, that causes a lot of continuity issues because the Velaryons have married so many times with the Targaryens. For example, the mother of Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys was a Velaryon, and their mother was a Velaryon. So if the Velaryons had always been black, then the conquerors should be, biracial, somewhere in the middle as far as skin tone. That seems like a lot of changing of the canon. So it makes a lot more sense to suppose that what they're going to do is Corlys's mother, or perhaps even one generation before. Corlys is pretty. So some people have talked about this. Corlys is pretty dark. The actor that they've cast, Steve Toussaint. So if it's only his mother that's black, he probably shouldn't be. He should be like a little lighter skin tone. But I don't think that that's probably something that they're worried about. I would think that they probably cast the actor based on their performance. And if the world building requires that one of his parents is black and one of them is a more pale looking Velaryon, he just came out dark or whatever, I would guess. But the fact that they've changed Vaemond from cousin to brother seems like, okay, well, that's why they're going to explain it. It's they have a common mother who brought the Summer Islander, probably, genes into House Velaryon. So that little change is a little bit of a clue. And no, it doesn't really matter too much. It's kind of interesting just to see how they iron up the continuity and stuff. And I'm of the opinion that the Summer Islander parent makes the most sense, because obviously Corlys is this famous mariner, and the Summer Islanders are the most skilled mariners in the world. So makes sense that Corlys's mom would be a Summer Islander. And since they've changed his cousin to his brother, I think that's probably more evidence that that's what they're doing. So moving on, we've got... we're talking about King Viserys, aren't we? This guy. sitting on the throne, born in 77 AC. He's actually the rider. I wrote Vhagar here. This is wrong. I should say Balerion. We're changing the notes in real time. Rider of Balerion the Black Dread. Now, Viserys only rode Balerion one time, and on the right is the burning of Harrenhal by Simonetti. However, he was the last person to ride Balerion. Rode him in 93 AC, a couple times around King's Landing and back down. Could barely be roused. He's old and sluggish. And that's it. Balerion dies in 94 AC, and Viserys never rides another dragon. Here's the thing, though, and I'm going to talk about this in the Meet the Dragons video, but I tend to think that they might show us a little flashback with Viserys and Balerion, or maybe Balerion, his skull. You know, maybe you'll see Viserys talking to Balerion's skull beneath the Red Keep, having some flashbacks or something. Because if you look at this dragon here on the left, he looks like Balerion. There's only a couple of black dragons in the story. There's Balerion, there's Drogon, and there's the Cannibal. The Cannibal technically has green eyes. So if they're following canon, this would not be the Cannibal. The Cannibal does come into the Dance of the Dragons, so we should see the Cannibal. However, this to me, it could just be a generic black dragon, and there's nothing to read into it. But essentially, this looks like Balerion the Black Dread. And so I think that if they're going to make a whole bunch of CGI dragons, you might as well do Balerion. So yeah, you have to show Balerion, right? So he wouldn't be in his prime, but it would be the biggest possible Balerion. And I think this would help establish the character of Viserys a little bit, to give a flashback, you know, to when he was riding a dragon. It was established him as a Targaryen. Because he's going to sit the throne, he's going to have black fire, but everyone around him is riding dragons. He's not. And Calagon, the best black dragon. Yeah, shout out to Kugelblitz and Calagon. That's from Lord of the Rings. And when do we get a full trailer? I've got no idea. I'm not in the prediction business. I have no idea. But like I said, this could be Balerion. We could see Balerion in a flashback. That's cool. But it's important to know that Viserys is a dragon rider and did ride Balerion. So he marries Emma Arryn. Let's see. I had that picture back here. Where was he? Yes. He marries Emma Arryn in 93 AC. Same year he rides Balerion. So he's kind of coming up in the world in 93. And in 97, Emma gives birth to Rhaenyra. Of course, Rhaenyra Targaryen, very important character. One of the main characters. So in 105 AC, that's when Jaehaerys dies and Viserys takes the throne. And his death in 129 will set off the dance. But season 1 is going to start probably somewhere near the beginning of Viserys' reign. I would imagine with the great, potentially even the Great Council of 101 AC. We might see that in flashback, but I think we'll get history going back to the Great Council. And we've only got those two pictures of Viserys, so it's hard to get this actor as Paddy Considine. It's hard to get too much of an idea of how he's going to portray him. And remember, Viserys goes through a bit of a transformation. When he starts off his rule, he's jolly and jovial and a little pudgy maybe. He gets older, he gets very overweight, he gets gout, and then he cut off a couple of his fingers on the Iron Throne and stops sitting on the throne. So by the time he dies, he's actually in a pretty bad state. So we'll probably see a degradation of his physical condition through the show. So this picture we're seeing here, this is probably a little younger, somewhere maybe in the middle of his reign, I would say. So it's coming out in August. So we're about 3.5 months away. So yeah, the trailer, it might be another month or so. Oh, Paddy was in Peaky Blinders? Who was he in Peaky Blinders? I watched the first 4 seasons of that. It's not really enough mythology to break down in Peaky Blinders, but it is a pretty wicked show. Who's the Targ on the left? Well, that's King Viserys. That's him. That's King Viserys, unless you're behind. Yeah, he does have a mustache. I can show you the mustache. I've got that picture somewhere, right here. So yeah, King Viserys, he does have a mustache. So on the left is Chili Ravenheart. That's Emma and Viserys getting married. And then, of course, Doug Wheatley on the right. Jovial King Viserys. Open-handed and generous. Jay Kelsey asks, do you think House of the Dragon will do the strong bastards debate? Yes. With Rhaenor being black, it seems less plausible for the kids to be debatable. Potentially, but Rhaenor is already biracial, and the guy they've cast as Rhaenor does have lighter skin. So by the time you're talking about Rhaenyra's kids, it could be somewhat ambiguous. But in the way it is in the books is that it's pretty clear that they're Harwin's kids, unless there's a vast Maester conspiracy going on. Now, here's the thing. There is some evidence that there's a vast Maester conspiracy going on. I read a post on Reddit which made the case for the bastards being real. And it wasn't necessarily saying that they are real, but it was making the case that there's enough uncertainty that we should wonder about it. So we'll have to see how the show handles that. I was thinking about tackling that in a different stream or just dealing with that when I talk about the kids. So I'm going to kind of avoid the bastardy question today when talking about Rhaenyra because it's sort of its own topic, and I think I want to hold it for later. There's enough to talk about without going for that. But yes, that's going to be obviously a major plot line. So that's Viserys, and we're going to go into more detail. I'm just giving you the outline of when these people lived and who their parents were, so that when we start reading the narrative, you know, we already know who these people are and they'll stand out a little better. So Daemon Targaryen, he's probably the one character we know the best. He stands out in our mind. He's the number one flying D. He's flying his D all over the place. Dragons, that is. And this is the actor. Matt somebody. I don't know. He's been on some shows. I forget who he was on what show. Woo. No, he was Doctor Who, of course. Here is Fodley Ramdani's Rogue Prince Daemon. This is probably my favorite Daemon art. I've got a couple of pieces of Daemon art that I like, but this is definitely captures the spirit of Caraxes, a ferocious dragon who, again, we'll talk about in the Dragons video this week. Daemon is born in 81, so he's Viserys' younger brother. They're 4 years apart. And he marries first to Rhea Royce. Daemon has a lot of ladies. He's a ladies' man. There's no doubt. So he marries Rhea Royce in 97, and they're married for almost 20 years. They have a very loveless marriage, and they don't have any kids. So that one doesn't go so well. Then he marries Rhaenys and Velaryon from 115 to 120. And they have 2 kids, Baela and Rhaena, of course. And then we've got Rhaenyra. He's married to Rhaenyra from 120 to 130. So basically the 10 years leading up to the dance. And from their loins spring Aegon III and Viserys II, as well as a stillborn child named Visenya. And what that means is that Rhaenyra and Daemon actually, their children will sit the throne. Both of them, both Aegon and Viserys. Aegon III and Viserys II will sit the throne. So even though Rhaenyra kind of loses the war, quote unquote, really everybody loses. All the major contestants of the war end up losing in one form or another. And ultimately it's the children of Daemon and Rhaenyra who sit the throne. I just think that's interesting. I'm curious to see how far past the death of Rhaenyra they will take the show. I would assume they'll go all the way past the death of Aegon II and the crowning of Aegon III. But I'm spoiling everything. So let me just keep going here. Rhaenyra Targaryen, the Realm's Delight. As you can see, she's born in 97. So there's a 16-year gap between Daemon and Rhaenyra. And Viserys is basically 20 when he has Rhaenyra. He's born in 77, Rhaenyra in 97. So Rhaenyra is called the Realm's Delight. She also has a lot of other less savory nicknames. The Bitch Queen, the Half-Year Queen. She's called the Whore of Dragonstone, which is a reference to the Whore of Babylon, which is actually a mythology thing. Yeah, the Realm's Delight, that's the one I decided to put up there. It's kind of a nicer nickname. She rides Syrax, of course. Here is Rhaenyra. And here is Syrax. And this is Uma Andressa, Rhaenyra riding Syrax. So she's married to Rhaenys Velaryon in... Actually, let me... let's see. Where is that picture? I've got one of her and Rhaenys together. Sorry, I got these mostly in order. Nope, that's Daemon and Mysaria. Here we go. Rhaenyra marries Rhaenys, and they make quite the handsome couple, but of course they're both in love with other people. Rhaenys's gay, he has a boyfriend. Rhaenyra's involved with Harwin Strong, and then later Daemon. So, yeah, Carl, you can't be the bitch queen. Sorry, it's taken. And then with Rhaenys, or perhaps Harwin, she fathers Jaehaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey in 114, 115, and 117. And I'd like to point out, they talk about Rhaenyra keeping the weight on after she has these kids. You'll notice she has 3 kids in 4 years. So maybe, like, cut her some slack, or, like, how about we give her some time to recover before we get her pregnant again, guys? Jeez, Harwin. Have you guys ever heard of Tansy tea? Anyway. So those are the 4 characters. And of course, Daemon Targaryen and Rhaenyra, they have, like I said, Aegon III and Viserys. And stillborn Visenya. So here we go with our narrative. Who's a thirst trap? Harwin? Yeah, Harwin. I'll give you some Harwin thirst. Here we go. Hang on, I've got it for later, but... This is Ryan Core, cast as Harwin Strong. And then on the left is Chili Ravenheart. Guys, 30 seconds. Let me just grab something real quick. Yeah, both Harwin and Kristen Cole are appropriately thirsty. They're gentlemen that everyone thirsts after. Yeah, handsome Aussies. That's right. Swallow Targaryen. All right, so let me go back here. We're going to start our narrative with Prince Balon and Prince Aemon, and this is Paparinka art. Sorry, it's Aemon on the left, Balon on the right. So the succession, guys, appeared solid as stone. But the stone began to crack in 92 AC when Aemon, Prince of Dragonstone, was slain on Tarth by a mere crossbow bolt loosed at the man beside him. The king and queen mourned his loss, and the realm with them, but no man was more bereft than Prince Balon, who went at once to Tarth and avenged his brother by driving the mermen into the sea. Back to the sea, you merman. On his return to King's Landing, Balon was hailed as a hero. Where do you want to go? You want to sit on the microphone? That's not going to work, obviously. Balon was hailed as a hero by the cheering throngs and embraced by his father, the king, who named him Prince of Dragonstone and heir to the Iron Throne. It was a popular decree. The small folk loved Balon the Brave, and the lords of the realm saw him as his brother's obvious successor. And I've got a picture of, that's the Great Council. Oh, this is the one I'm looking for. So here's Jaehaerys and Balon. So this is after Balon gets back from slaying the mermen and avenging Aemon's death. He names him his successor, and the traumatized realm takes solace in the fact, well, at least we've got Prince Balon. We lost beautiful Prince Aemon, but we have Balon. So cheering throngs named the heir Balon the Brave. So he's got Balon the Spring Prince and Balon the Brave nicknames. The Lords of the Realm saw him as his brother's obvious successor. But, as we mentioned last time, Prince Aemon had a child who would be Rhaenys, the queen who never was. She's 18 at this point. She's wed to Corlys Velaryon for 2 years. She already rides a dragon. She's already been accompanying Jaehaerys on the royal progresses. So she's definitely, at 18, she's already a strong figure. And she's also pregnant at this time with her first child, who could be a boy, could be an heir. We don't know at this point. So it says, Aegon the Conqueror had been the first lord of the Seven Kingdoms, not his sister Visenya, 2 years his elder. Jaehaerys himself had followed his usurping uncle Maegor on the Iron Throne, though had the order of birth alone ruled, his sister Rhaena had a better claim. So this is something that somebody mentioned last time in the stream that I forgot to put in my notes, and I just want to come back to harp on it here. One of the reasons why Jaehaerys had to keep choosing male heirs is because he himself took the throne over an older sister. And many of the other, as Isabel Lamego pointed out, many of the other lords of Westeros would no doubt have older sisters lurking around too. And so if they had named Rhaenys, the queen who never was, as the heir, that would potentially throw into question a lot of people's hold on power. And I think this is very perceptive. And it's right here in the narrative. It says, though had the order of birth alone ruled, Jaehaerys' sister Rhaena had a better claim. And then it says, Jaehaerys did not make his decision lightly. So it's right there. It's like, oh, he thought hard about it. And then he remembered that he had an older sister who he kind of usurped. And so, yeah. Then he was like, oh, that's right. So, by the way, how's the volume on the microphone? It was a little quiet last time, and I turned it up. And I just want to make sure it's not too loud. Hopefully it's coming through a little better. And yeah, Isabel, great point. Thank you for that. So undoubtedly he consulted Septon Barth, as he did on all such matters, and the views of Grand Maester Elisar, blah, 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 all were in accord. Balon, a seasoned knight of 35, was better suited for rule than the 18-year-old Princess Rhaenys, or her unborn babe, who may or may not be a boy, whereas Prince Balon had already sired 2 healthy sons, Viserys and Daemon. The love of the commons for Balon the Brave was also cited. So Rhaenys objected, saying, you would rob my son of his birthright. And of course, it didn't turn out to be a boy. It turned out to be Laena. Quote, the volume is good. And then Jocelyn Baratheon, the mother of Rhaenys and the widow of Aemon, she's mad, of course. And Jocelyn's brother, Lord Bormund Baratheon, he's also mad. So you've got Velaryon's, Baratheon's, both mad, and the queen who never was. And then Alysanne herself was mad. She was actually the most prominent dissenter. She was estranged for Jaehaerys for 2 years after this choosing of Balon over Rhaenys. And this is the famous quote. Alysanne says, a ruler... first original feminist of Westeros. We'll talk about Visenya's not so much a feminist as just a force of nature, but Alysanne, active feminist. A ruler needs a good head and a true heart, she famously told the king. A cock is not essential. If your grace truly believes that women lack the wit to rule, plainly you have no further need of me. And then she flew off to Dragonstone for 2 years. And this is one of the points I want to make about the dragons. The dragons won't just be used for combat. Dragons afford Targaryen princes and princesses a fair amount of autonomy. You know, anybody with a dragon is kind of powerful in their own right. And really, if you think about it, the Targaryen claim on power is based on having dragons. So any Targaryen with a dragon can be a king or a queen. They're somebody that has more power than any other regular person. So 2 dragon lords get in an argument, 1 dragon lord can just hop on the dragon and peace out, and that's that. So just have to remember that. We'll see that a few times with different characters. Daemon Targaryen, definitely a character who's going to storm off on his dragon at times. And yes, you can find LML merch in the link right below the video. I need to update that, though, with some new stuff. I'm not sure, guys. I don't know. Does anybody know if can I make a t-shirt with that logo? Or is anything with the Targaryen dragon going to be copyrighted? Somebody tell me the answer. Because that would be a cool shirt if we could make it. So after Septon Barth dies, Balon dies too. First, he replaces him. In 99, Balon replaces Barth as the Hand of the King, and so he's basically training to become king by being the Hand. This is something the Targaryens did. He performed his duties admirably. He's less scholarly than Septon Barth, but he's a good judge of character. Blah, 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 blah. 2 years go by, then Balon dies. He complained of a stitch in his side whilst hunting in the Kingswood. The pain worsened when he returned to the city. His belly swelled and hardened, and the pain grew so severe it left him bedridden. Runseter, was only able to bring the fever down. It says on the 5th day of the illness, Prince Balon died in his bedchamber. And after opening the corpse, Grandmaster Runseter put down the cause of death as a burst belly. So that's probably an appendix, right? Is that what that is? Somebody with medical knowledge. I've got recently gained a commenter with extensive medical knowledge that's been straightening me out on a couple things. But what arteries are which? Yeah, I'm probably good, they're saying on the t-shirt. That's cool. Right on. So burst belly, burst appendix, something happened to Prince Balon, and he died. And so this is what brings us to the Great Council. Everyone weeps. Jaehaerys is so alone. There's no lack of claimants. It says Balon had sired 3 sons by his sister Alyssa. 2, Viserys and Daemon, still lived. And let me go back for that picture. There we go. So had Balon ever taken the Iron Throne, Viserys would have followed him without question. But the Crown Prince's tragic death at the age of 44 muddied the succession. See, that's what happens. Jaehaerys hung around too long. Ruptured intestines could have been, yeah. How does that happen? Please state the nature of your medical emergency. It feels like I'm dying in my stomach, and I'm trapped in a medieval society with no effective surgery. What do I do? Not a lot. Jackie says she thinks that he was poisoned. But who would poison Balon? Who's got the motive? Because there's nobody there that's ready to claim power when he dies. You know, there's 2 rival claimants, and they have to do this whole thing. But if there's a longer theory to that, Jackie, let me know. There are a lot of suspicious deaths in Fire and Blood, and some of them are bound to be foul play. And we're going to talk about a couple of those later, actually. That's right. Poison. Bum, bum, ba-dun, dun, bum, 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 ba-da-da-da. Sorry, MF Doom. Ah, yes. Poison. Leave it alone, folks. So King Jaehaerys has one surviving son, who is Vagon, an Archmaester of the Citadel. And he's called in to help counsel. Some think that maybe he was offered the throne, but more likely he was called in to help Viserys figure out what to do. Or Jaehaerys, because Jaehaerys is old, he's alone. His wife is still on Dragonstone, I think, at this time. Oh, no, his wife is dead. That's right, Alysanne dies in 100. So Jaehaerys is now, he's without Alysanne. He's without Septon Barth. His 2 best sons are dead. He doesn't know what to do. So he calls basically his brother. I'm sorry, not his brother, his son. Yes. Vagon. But he's an Archmaester at the Citadel. He doesn't have any kids, so that's not an ideal king. And yes, Vagon is a hella cool name. Vagon was pale and frail, a bookish man devoted to alchemy, astronomy, mathematics, and other arcane arts. Even as a boy, he had never been well liked. Few considered him a viable choice. So others assert that he only sought his counsel. Then it says, reports had reached the court. The Corless Velaryon was massing ships and men on Driftmark to defend the rights of his son, Laenor. And let me go back to the Great Council picture, because that's about what time it is. Whilst Daemon Targaryen, a hot-tempered and quarrelsome young man of 20, had gathered his own band of sworn swords in support of his brother Viserys. A violent struggle for succession was likely, no matter who the old king named to succeed him. No doubt that was why his grace seized eagerly on the solution offered by Archmaester Vagon. So this is really a pretty clever thing, the Great Council, as far as, we need a way so that the losers will accept the loss. We would like to not go to war, please. And so they invent democracy, kind of. It's not straight democracy. Obviously, only the powerful lords have a vote. So it's very elitist democracy, but it's a vote. They vote on a thing and everyone accepts the vote. So it's a very infant form of democracy, and it's pretty cool. And it works. They pick, well, let me go through they pick Viserys. However, let me read this because the other candidates are interesting. We got some other Targaryens that are mentioned here. So no fewer than 14 claims were duly examined and considered by the lords assembled. From Essos came 3 rival competitors, grandsons of Jaehaerys through his daughter Sarah, each sired by a different father. One was said to be the very image of his grandsire in his youth. Another, a bastard born to a triarch of old Volantis, arrived with bags of gold and a dwarf elephant. The lavish gifts he distributed among the poor lords undoubtedly helped his claim. The elephant proved less useful. And Princess Sarah herself was still alive and well in Volantis, and only 34 years of age. Her own claim was clearly superior to those of any of her bastard sons, but she did not choose to press it. I have my own kingdom here, she said, when asked if she meant to return to Westeros. Another contestant produced sheafs of parchment that demonstrated his descent from Daemon the Glorious, the greatest of the Targaryen lords of Dragonstone before the conquest, by way of a younger daughter and the petty lord she had married, and on for 7 further generations. I was about to say, that's many generations back. So that's cool. There's this little family on Dragonstone that's been keeping alive this family story about how they descend from this older Targaryen, Daemon the Glorious. Let me see if I can look him up and see if we know when he lived or where he is. Oh, he's the son of Aenar Targaryen, it looks like, who's the one who moved the Targaryens. The second Lord of Dragonstone. The greatest Targaryen Lord of Dragonstone. I wonder why that is. Jaehaerys named his 11th child after Daemon. Sadly, the babe came early and Prince Daemon died. One of the 4, right. Okay, that's interesting. Oh, so here's the Targaryen family. Oh, we do have it. I didn't know we had this. So Aenar Targaryen brings them to Dragonstone. Then, I guess, is that Daenys the Dreamer? His daughter? Probably, right? Yes. Oh, that's quite the couple. Daemon the Glorious and Daenys the Dreamer. Where's that prequel? That's pretty sweet, actually. So then they have 2 kids, Aegon and Elena. That's a Targaryen. So here's that petty lord, And this is the line which leads to this bastard claimant. Okay. And then I want to see where the Velaryons come in. So Aegon and Elena, and then Magon and Aerys. So we're doing incest here. Yep, that's an Aerys. That's a Targaryen. Aelix, Balin, Daemon. So here are the Velaryons. Yeah, so Aerion, the father of the conqueror, Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys, he married a Velaryon, Valena, and Valena's mother, Valena was half Targaryen already, so we don't know who her parents were, but some other branch of this family tree might connect. Well, it's a Targaryen family tree. It's kind of like a spider web. Good Lord, that's a lot of incest. Yeah, it's a lot of incest by the lords, actually. I don't know how good they are, but it's definitely a lot of incest. So, Daemon the Glorious. There you go. There's a little freebie for you. Extra Targaryen. Bonus Targaryen. And let me, by the way, I want to pull up the... where's the... Sorry, a little more behind the scenes than you usually get, but I need the Nimble Doc. And yes, I'm getting a passport. Going to Australia. House Velaryon. Okay, so it looks like... All right, we're good here. Yeah, show me the new changes. Okay, yeah, I did get those two. Excellent. Very good. So there's the proof. Now you guys see how this works. If I miss it, that's where it goes. It goes into the Nimble Doc, and then I can grab it. So picking up the narrative here, Daemon the Glorious. Let's see. There was as well a strapping, red-haired man-at-arms who claimed to be a bastard son of Maegor the Cruel. By way of proof, he brought his mother, an aged innkeep's daughter, who said that she had once been raped by Maegor. The lords were prepared to believe the fact of rape, but not that the act had gotten her with child. So, yeah, that's not going to be, that's not going to get you the throne there. So the Great Council deliberated for 13 days. And the tenuous claims of the 9 lesser competitors were considered and discarded. One such, a hedge knight who put himself forward as a natural son of Jaehaerys himself, was seized and imprisoned when the king exposed him as a liar. Oh, exposed him as a liar. You mean called him a liar. But yeah, same thing. The Great Council deliberated for 13 days. Oh, I just read that. Archmaester Vagon was ruled out. Princess Rhaenys and her daughter on account of their sex, leaving the 2 claimants with the most support. And you can see Rhaenys and her daughter Laena in the upper right corner of the image there. Let's see. It says, so leaving 2 claimants, right, of course. Viserys, the eldest son of Balin and Alyssa, and Laenor, the son of Rhaenys, and the grandson of Prince Aemon. Viserys was the old king's grandson, Laenor his great-grandson. We already went over all this. Primogeniture favored Laenor. Proximity favored Viserys. Viserys had ridden Balerion. We talked about that. Laenor rides Sea Smoke at this point. And like I said, we went for the claim that derives from his father, and we decided that the throne can't even pass through a woman at all, because that introduces too much ambiguity, again, with the claims of the lords of Westeros. So, Laenor loses. Corlys and House Velaryon are mad, but the vote is lopsided, so they accept it, as we discussed. So King Jaehaerys, he did not attend the council, but when the word of their verdict reached him, his grace thanked the lords for their service and gratefully conferred the style Prince of Dragonstone upon his grandson Viserys. Storm's End and Driftmark accepted the decision, if grudgingly. The vote had been so overwhelming that even Laenor's father and mother could not protest. So, in the eyes of many, the Great Council of 101 established an iron precedent on the matter of succession. A precedent which will be violated by Viserys only like 20 years later. But that's cool. See, Viserys is not as clever as Jaehaerys. He named his daughter the heir undermining his own claim and created a very big inconsistency, which everyone was confused about afterwards. And obviously, I'm not saying that it's wrong that women would have the throne. Jaehaerys and Alysanne should have sorted this out way back when. So, we talked about this last time. It's basically a development of ambiguity around the law, and its bottom line is it's the ambiguity which causes the issue. And the reason there's ambiguity is because the law doesn't make sense. It's unjust. Having a penis does not make you smarter. That is, science has proven that. So, Alysanne was correct. So of the last years of the reign of King Jaehaerys, little and less need be said. Balon had served his father as hand, but after his death, his grace elected to divide those honors. Prince of Dragonstone and Hand of the King. So his new hand, he called upon Sir Otto Hightower, younger brother to Lord Hightower of Old Town. This guy. Sir Otto brought his wife and children to court with him and served King Jaehaerys faithfully for the years remaining to him. As the old king's strength and wits began to fail, he was oft confined to his bed. Sir Otto's precocious 15-year-old daughter, Alicent, became his constant companion, fetching his grace his meals, reading to him, helping him to bathe and dress himself. The old king sometimes mistook her for one of his daughters, calling her by their names. Near the end, he grew certain she was his daughter Sarah, returned to him from beyond the narrow sea. Factually incorrect. Let me line this up perfectly. Sorry, hang on. There we go. So in 103, Jaehaerys dies as Lady Alicent was reading to him. He was 9 and 60. That's why I thought he was 96. I mistakenly said he was in his 90s. He was in his 60s. But since it says 9, and they have that weird convention of saying 9 and 60. That's why I was thinking he's 96. But of course that's 69. So he dies. His remains were burned in the dragon pit, his ashes interred with good Queen Alysanne's on Dragonstone. All of Westeros mourned, even in Dorne, where his writ had not extended. In accordance with his own wishes and the decision of the Great Council, Viserys succeeded him, mounting the Iron Throne as King Viserys I, Targaryen. At the time of his ascent, King Viserys was 26. He had been married for a decade to his cousin, Lady Aemma, a granddaughter of the old king and Queen Alysanne through her mother, Princess Daemon, who we talked about all that. Lady Aemma had suffered several miscarriages and the death of one son in the cradle over the course of her marriage. Some maesters felt she had been married and bedded too young, but she had also given birth to a healthy daughter, Rhaenyra, born in 97. The new king and his queen both doted on the girl, their only living child. Many consider the reign of Viserys I to represent the apex of Targaryen power in Westeros. Beyond a doubt, there was more lords and princes claiming the blood of the dragon than at any period before or since. Though the Targaryens had continued their traditional practice of marrying brother to sister, uncle to niece, and cousin to cousin whenever possible. That's right, whenever possible, as much incest as possible. There had also been important matches outside the royal family, the fruit of which would play important roles in the war to come. There were more dragons than ever before as well, and several of the she-dragons were regularly producing clutches of eggs. Not all of these eggs hatched, but many did, and became customary for the fathers and mothers of newborn princelings to place a dragon's egg in their cradles, following a tradition that Princess Rhaenyra had begun many years before. The children so blessed invariably bonded with the hatchlings to become dragon riders. And I want to point out that George is doing a similar thing here with the direwolves. You know, the idea that all 6 Starks are weirdly born with skin changer magic when there hasn't been Stark skin changers for generations, that doesn't really make sense. It's far more likely that they all carry the latent ability the Starks do, and that having the direwolves activated the bond, the magic link. Similarly, we see that if you place a dragon egg in the cradle, the kids grow up and bond with that dragon. So similar to how Dany's carrying her eggs around and she can feel it reaching out to her and calling to her, there's a connection that forms before the dragon even hatches. We saw that with Dany. We should probably assume that these little babies in the cradles, these little Targaryen babies, are having dragon dreams probably and communicating with their dragon in the egg, much like Dany is. I would guess that that's happening. Unless they're produced by the Red Comet, but the Red Comet didn't come around when they were born, and they were all born a couple years apart. So I don't know that the Red Comet would explain the Stark. Yeah, activated maybe. I could see that, perhaps. But they get the direwolves first, so I don't know. It's all speculation, but I would think that the presence of the animal has something to do with it. So Viserys I, he had a generous, amiable nature, as you can see in this picture by Doug Wheatley, and was well loved by his lords and small. I mean, look, if you have a mustache, that means you're down to party. That's all. The only reason you have a mustache is to party. So that's Viserys. He's jovial. His grace's open-handedness was legendary. The Red Cape became a place of song and splendor. King Viserys and Queen Aemma hosted many a feast and tourney and lavished gold, offices, and honors on their favorites. At the center of the merriment, cherished and adored by all, was their only surviving child, Princess Rhaenyra, the little girl the singers dubbed the Realm's Delight. There's Rhaenyra. I love the Doug Wheatley on the right, mushroom, and little Rhaenyra throwing up her arms in joy. She's like, yes, I love this. The mushroom is so funny. And actually, in the last days of Rhaenyra's reign, when she's getting paranoid and crazy, she still has mushroom, supposedly the only one that can make her laugh. So Rhaenyra actually has a connection to mushroom, like, for her whole life. Oh, thank you, Anu. Thank you, yes. My Ice Spiders videos, my pride and joy. It's my baby. In fact, I'm going to keep talking about that video until it has 1 million views. It's my best, most unappreciated video. It's going to be my axe to grind. I'm going to keep saying it until it's just some kind of bad joke. Anyways, watch the Ice Spiders video. It's the best LML. It's got storytelling analysis. It's got teleporting White Walkers, Old Nan. It's got jokes. It's got teleporting White Walkers. It's got flying ice spiders. I spent all this time making the ice spiders rear up on their hind legs and then fly off into the wind. Man, it should have 1 million views. Anyways, that's okay. That's okay. The amount of effort you put into a video does not correspond to the views. We've learned that already. We know that. That's how YouTube works. So at the center is Rhaenyra, the Realm's Delight. She's only 6 when her father came to the throne, but she was, again, a precocious child. What does that even mean? Aren't all children kind of precocious? I don't know. Orlando says, do you think there will be any mention in the show of the Doom being an inside job that positioned the Targaryens as the most powerful soul-remaining dragon-riding family left in the world? That's a great question. I've wondered that myself, Orlando. That's a very good question. I think that what it looks like is that they're going to play up the angle of the dragon dreams. So probably, if they talk, to the extent they talk about the Doom, and they probably will, I'm guessing that they'll actually more emphasize the idea of the dragon dream being authentic, and that they actually got the warning and left for that reason. I don't know if they'll... Of course, I have a video called The Doom Was an Inside Job and The Doom Was an Abolition, follow-up video, and I strongly believe it's a good theory for the books. I'm not sure if it would serve the purpose of the show, however. The purpose of discovering that Aenar Targaryen may have been an abolitionist that condemned Valyria to doom in order to stop their genocide and slavery is to draw a link between Aenar and Daenerys, who uses her dragons again to end the slave trade, or to try to end it, in Slaver's Bay. And she's headed to Volantis as well. So there's supposed to be an abolitionist link that we can draw between Aenar and Daenerys, I think. But I don't know if that really serves the show, because there's no slavery is not going to be a thing in the show. There's no slavery in Westeros. Daenerys isn't in the show. She's not in Meereen. So I think the dragon dream is probably the thing that they will play up with the Doom. But maybe they'll give a little nod to the conspiracy theory angle. I don't have my hopes up for that, I will say. Even though I'm proud of the theory, and I think it's a real solid theory in and of itself. So the Realm's Delight, she's only 6 when Viserys takes the throne, but she's bright and bold and beautiful. At 7, she became a dragon rider. That's crazy. Taken to the sky on her young dragon named Syrax, after a goddess of old Valyria. So that really does tell you this is a magical bond that builds from the time, of baby and dragon egg in the cradle. That's the only way you have a 7-year-old riding a dragon. A 7-year-old doesn't walk into the dragon pit and just pick a dragon at random and climb on. That's something that's been a pet for her since it hatched. So, very tight relationship, I think we can assume there. So Aenar, there's a line, it says that Aenar brought all the members of his household and his dragons and his slaves to Dragonstone. That's what it said. Now, in Valyria, obviously, they had a system of slavery. They had both. They had the Roman kind of slavery that we see in Slaver's Bay, as well as the absolute, chattel slavery where they're just feeding people into the mines as disposable workers. They had both of that going on. So when it says that Aenar brought his slaves to Dragonstone, what I think, and this is, I'm reading into this here, but I think what probably happened is that he would have brought his household slaves, who would have been, his butler, his, maybe the teacher of his kids, his gardener, his household, basically. He would have brought them to Dragonstone. They would have become the small folk of Dragonstone. That's probably what happened, because there is no slavery in Westeros, and we never again hear of slaves on Dragonstone. We don't hear of the Targaryens having them. We don't hear of, Aenar feeding slaves into the mines to mine Dragonstone. They're not mining really anything out of Dragonstone. It's said that dragon glass is found there, but we never hear of slavery and mining going on and stuff. So what I would assume is that Aenar brought his household slaves with him so that they don't die in the Doom, and then they essentially became the small folk of Dragonstone. And certainly if he had a hand in the Doom because he thought slavery was wrong, then that would be a safe assumption. And it's also, I think, a safe assumption simply because we don't ever again hear about slaves on Dragonstone, and Westeros is, they don't have slavery, at least not in current times. The Ironborn have the thralls, which is kind of its own thing. Sorry, I'm having a hard time clearing my throat. It is 4:20, so let me praise Garth and do it that way and give you all a little funky Game of Thrones music once again. All right, and we are boiling tea as well. See if I can clear the cobwebs out that way. So we're back to the quad screen. And yeah, that's me slapping the bass with my cousin Jamie on the keyboards, Bernard Purdy on the drums. He came over to my house and I recorded. No, it's a Bernard Purdy loop sample track. So where were we? Viserys. So at 8, the Princess Rhaenyra becomes the cupbearer, but for her own father, the king. So that just puts her at table, at tourney, at court, at the side of King Viserys so that she can learn how to rule the kingdom, essentially. So Viserys is seldom seen without his daughter. How cute. How cute. Meanwhile, the tedium of rule was largely left to the king's small council and his hand. This guy. Sir Otto Hightower had continued in that office, serving the grandson as he had the grandsire. An able man, all agreed, though many found him proud, brusque, and haughty. The longer he served, the more imperious Sir Otto became, it was said, and many great lords and princes came to resent his manner and envy him his access to the Iron Throne. So let's talk about Otto's motivations here real quick. Otto is a second son, right? His older brother is a lord of Old Town, and that's the Hightowers are one of the most prestigious families in the kingdom. I mean, you got your Casterleys, your Gardeners before the conquest, they're gone. So the Hightowers are definitely the most powerful and oldest family in the Reach. Even if the Tyrells are the overlords of the Reach, the Hightowers are older and have more cachet. And Old Town, of course, has its own history going back to the Great Empire of the Dawn and pre-First Men and all this. I mean, I can't even go into Old Town, but check out the Great Empire of the Dawn videos, especially the one Great Empire of the Dawn Westeros. That's got all your House Dane and House Hightower lore. And by the way, if you're new to the channel, these are my greatest watched videos of all time, the Great Empire of the Dawn series. It's all in a playlist. The first one, by the way, I hadn't told you guys, is over 200,000 views now. So, yeah, I'm almost caught up to the History of Westeros version of the Great Empire of the Dawn theory, which, of course, I, many, many years ago, shared with History of Westeros, and we presented it together on their channel, only for them later to then represent it as their theory on an Indie Geek stream. But we already had it out about that, so please don't go and leave any angry comments anywhere. But point is, Great Empire of the Dawn, one of my oldest theories, and it actually turned 7 years old. My original typed version of it came out in April of 2015, so it just turned 7 years old recently. But check out the Great Empire of the Dawn playlist. Sorry, I got off track there. The first two in particular, Dragon Lords of Ancient Ashai, and then that's number 1, and then 2 is Great Empire of the Dawn Westeros. And the Great Empire of the Dawn Westeros will give you all the Hightower and House Dane backstory and lore and theorizing that you could ever want. So, Otto Hightower, getting back to the point, he's from a proud house, a rich house, but he's a second son. So he's probably got a little bit of that little brother syndrome that is so common in the story. His brother is the powerful lord of Old Town, living at the top of the tower, and he's hand of the king. So after what am I trying to say? After Jaehaerys dies, and what am I trying to say? So Otto Hightower is the king for Jaehaerys. So Jaehaerys is old and dying, right? And so this basically means that Otto is ruling the kingdom effectively at the end here, because Jaehaerys is just old. He's starting to lose it a little bit. So then the young king comes, and Otto's power goes down a little bit, because now he has a more competent and a younger king to deal with. But Viserys is kind of a pushover, and he keeps Otto on. See, if Viserys was smart, he would have done what a new like owner or a new general manager does when they take over a sports team. You clean house. You fire all the old coaches. Some of them might be good, but you got to fire them because you need your own people in there. And it's all the more so true with the royalty here. So Otto Hightower, he's allowed to stay on as Hand when Viserys takes the throne. And Viserys basically just wants to have a good time and avoid conflict and throw feasts and stuff. So he's content to let Otto continue to rule. So Otto's power is increasing now, and his opinion of himself is probably getting pretty puffed up. I'm the one who holds this kingdom down. That's why I compared him to Tywin, because Tywin ruled the kingdom in name for a long time while Aerys was doing crazy ass shit. Even before he became super paranoid, old crazy Aerys, he was doing weird stuff like trying to make wooden dragons with wildfire. That was King Aerys, right? He was talking about building a second wall north of the wall of Westeros. So it was basically a similar situation where Tywin is running the kingdom in name for an absentee king. Otto Hightower is running the kingdom in name first for an old king and then for a quasi-absentee Viserys. So that's why you can see it here. The other lords, the longer he served, the more imperious he became, and many great lords and princes came to resent his manner and envy him his access to the Iron Throne. So he's basically sitting on that handship, like, you will pry this badge off of my chest, over my cold, dead body, essentially. That's where he's at. Now, the greatest of his rivals was this guy, Daemon Targaryen, the king's ambitious, impetuous, moody younger brother, as charming as he was hot-tempered. Prince Daemon had earned his knight's spurs at 6 and 10, and had been given Dark Sister, which you can see in his hand right there, by the old king himself in recognition of his prowess. So that's interesting. Jaehaerys, he passed on presumably Blackfire to King Viserys because he's the king. But he gave Daemon Dark Sister. So that tells you Daemon's sword fighting skill really stands out to be granted that honor. So he's similar to Daemon Blackfire, who comes later. I mean, he's a very skilled warrior. And notice that, like, when we talk about Daemon, there's one passage that says, oh yeah, Daemon, he's equal parts dark and light. But when you look at him, it's really mostly dark. There's not a lot of redeeming characteristics. And the redeeming characteristics are stuff like this. Well, he was charming. Well, what good is that? It's like, oh great, you're charming. Okay. That, that doesn't make him a good person, obviously, but he'll be charismatic. Very Jaime. I compared him to Jaime before, and I really think that's the thing to think about, is he's really going to come across like an older, more seasoned, even more entitled Jaime, who never got his hand chopped off, never got his pride broken. That's essentially what we're talking about here. So, though he had wed the Lady of Runestone in 97 AC, during the old king's reign, the marriage had not been a success. As I mentioned, Prince Daemon found the Vale of Arryn boring. Quote, I'm in the Vale. In the Vale, the men fuck sheep, he wrote. You cannot fault them. Their sheep are prettier than their women. And soon developed a mislike of his lady wife, whom he called my bronze bitch, after the runic bronze armor worn by the lords of House Royce. Upon the ascension of his brother to the Iron Throne, the prince petitioned to have his marriage set aside. Viserys denied the request, but did allow Daemon to return to court, where he sat on the small council, serving as Master of Coin from 103 to 104, and Master of Laws for half a year in 104. So essentially, he is estranged from his wife. I can't turn, the volume is like all the way up. It's going into the yellow when I talk loud. Maybe I'm just too far away from the mic. But yeah, I really can't turn it up any louder. The system audio is all the way up too. Apologies if it's not coming through loud enough. So he's estranged from his bronze bitch. He's hanging out at court. He doesn't have any kids with her. And you can see that he's kind of vain. And yeah, exactly, Isabel. Roasting your own wife is despicable. Yes, it is. So he's, it's pretty, that's very Daemon for you. So let me just grab my, my tea real fast. One second. Around here, we drink tea from the skull of Darth Vader, yes. So governance bored this warrior prince, however. He did better when King Viserys made him commander of the City Watch. And I've got some good Daemon City Watch artwork right here. So finding the watchmen ill-armed and clad in oddments and rags, Daemon equipped each man with dirk, short sword, and cudgel, armored them in black ring mail with breastplates for the officers, and gave them long golden cloaks that they might wear with pride. Ever since, the men of the City Watch have been known as Gold Cloaks. Sorry, the chat's being funny right now. Yeah, so essentially, so here's a redeeming, I guess this is a redeeming quality. Daemon is competent. He improves the City Watch, and he upgrades them. He brings more order to the city, a certain kind of order anyways. Prince Daemon took eagerly to the work of the Gold Cloaks and oft prowled the alleys of King's Landing with his men. That he made the city more orderly, no man could doubt, but his discipline was a brutal one. He delighted in cutting off the hands of pickpockets, gelding rapists, and slitting the noses of thieves, and slew 3 men in street brawls during his first year as commander. Before long, the prince was well known in all the low places of King's Landing. He became a familiar sight in wine sinks, where he drank for free, and gambling pits, where he always left with more coin than when he entered. Though he sampled countless whores in the city's brothels, and was said to have an especial fondness for deflowering maidens. That's probably just a rumor. A certain Lycene dancing girl soon became his favorite. Mysaria was the name she went by, though her rivals and enemies called her Misery, the White Worm. And I've got some Mysaria artwork right here. Lady Misery. She's going to be an awesome character. And this is one thing I will say. I mentioned this last time when I talked about, the idea of representation in Game of Thrones. Cool. Fantasy's been really white for a long time. It has. In fact, I would even say that fantasy has contributed to a false perception that the medieval world was more homogeneously white than it actually was. Of course, if you know anything about, medieval trade routes, relationship with Rome and the Mediterranean and the Middle East, it's a lot more complex. The Vikings were trading all over the place. You think about Vikings as living in Norway, but they sailed everywhere and traded with everywhere. Indus Valley was trading with Egypt, on and on and on and on and on. Point is, fantasy has created an impression that medieval societies should be homogeneously white. That's actually not the case. So, hooray, we've got black dragon lords now. Well, guess what? A lot of those Velaryons will have horrible things happen to them because guess what? This is Game of Thrones. So that's what it means to have representation in Game of Thrones, essentially, is is like, yes, black people deserve to be killed in horrible, nasty ways, just like the white people that have been on Game of Thrones. So one thing you have to remember with the violence in this story is like, there's a lot of awful stuff that happens to a lot of characters. There's awful violence that happens to female characters, and there's awful violence that happens to male characters. Now that we have black Velaryons, we're going to have awful things that happen to black characters and white characters. So one thing that you have to remember is that, to a certain extent, any show that's written for a modern audience has to consider how a modern audience will react to things, right? However, Westeros being a medieval society, it doesn't have the same sort of colorism type of racism that we do in a modern society. And in fact, ancient society was a lot more of tribalism than colorism. And the difference is that now a lot of the racism, it really does revolve around literally what tone your skin is, not what culture you come from, where you were born, if you were raised in America or Cameroon or somewhere else. It's literally about skin tone. And in a lot of the countries, like say the Philippines that have been colonized by, Great Britain, there's now a whole stigma in the Philippines of lighter and darker skin. Lighter skin, being more upper class and stuff like that. That's colorism, okay? Tribalism is when the groups form by essentially social cohesion. So the us and them isn't different skin tones, although sometimes it'll end up that way. It's more about the group and the society, okay? So when we talk about Westeros, their prejudice against the Dornish, okay? And the Dornish, some of the Dornish are a little darker, but it's not really a colorism prejudice. It's because the Dornish are culturally different and culturally separate. So all that is a long way of saying, in Game of Thrones, when you see all these violent things happening to people, there might be moments when you're like, oh God, they're doing this to, this character. Like, for example, on Game of Thrones, okay, this is the parallel that I need to talk about. On Game of Thrones, we only had a couple of characters of color, and the two most prominent ones were Missandei and Grey Worm. And Missandei and Grey Worm, of course, are both on Team Daenerys, who is a very popular character among black Game of Thrones fans because she is an abolitionist. This is a fact. If you've been online, you know that Daenerys is very popular with the black segment of the Game of Thrones fandom for that reason. So what we saw was kind of unfortunate. It rubbed a lot of people the wrong way because you had the two characters of color given very ugly endings. Missandei's death, and then Grey Worm was turned into the angry black guy trope, kind of. Then he raged out and was sort of totally sidelined. So that landed poorly. I think House of the Dragon is going to be different because we've got a lot of characters. Okay, we've got all these black characters from House Velaryon. We've got all these white characters. We've got the Strongs who are going to look different than the Targaryens. They're all going to suffer in horrible ways. So just sort of preparing you for when you watch that. Some of it might be like, ooh, oh gosh, that's kind of cringe. But this is what it means to be involved in Game of Thrones. And particularly with the women, a lot of the women in this story aren't going to be the passive kind of women that have no power. They're riding dragons and participating in war. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the show handles these things. And there will be some moments where it'll be kind of courageous, in a sense, to portray stuff that's going to be somewhat difficult. But hopefully they won't do it in the gratuitous sort of way that, like, for example, in the Red Wedding, which is already horrible, they added the pregnancy stabbing, which was, to me, like, very unnecessary. I'm hoping that we will not see that sort of violence porn in House of the Dragon, but there will be difficult scenes. So all of that is a long way of saying the one thing I hope they change is Mysaria's death. Mysaria is basically she's given the Cersei treatment, but she's whipped to death. And it's really awful. And I honestly do hope they change that. Everything else I think they'll probably keep. But I hope they change Mysaria's death. I would really hate to see it. I don't think it's something that they can portray on the screen really at all. So I think that probably will be changed a little. And let me just find a place for this teabag. Right there. There we go. So there'll definitely be a lot of violence, and it's something that we'll have to discuss as the show goes on, how they're handling it, essentially. Obviously, Game of Thrones was pretty violent. This is going to be just as brutal, if not worse, I would say. Whew, that is still hot. Okay, so let's get back to the story. So Misery the White Worm, here she comes into the story. As King Viserys had no living son, Daemon regarded himself as the rightful heir, and this is really important, to the Iron Throne, and coveted the title Prince of Dragonstone, which his grace refused to grant him. But by the end of year 105 AC, he was known to his friends as the Prince of the City, and to the small folk as Lord Fleabottom. And that's an awesome nickname. And I definitely think that this is something they'll lean into. Daemon Targaryen as the Lord of Fleabottom, running around in the low places. I definitely think they'll have a good Fleabottom set. We'll get Daemon fighting in the wine sinks and gambling and stuff. They've got to do that. I mean, they've cast Mysaria, so they need to give her some action. So, and that's where the blood and cheese plot comes from, is Daemon's connections to the city. It has a lot to do with them retaking King's Landing later. So I definitely think this whole Lord Fleabottom thing, they're going to play that up. And that's kind of what makes Daemon really interesting. It's like, he's a prince and he's of the blood royal, but he's not afraid to get his hands dirty, obviously, in the mud and all that. Lord Fleabottom. So though the king did not wish Daemon to succeed him, he remained fond of his younger brother and was quick to forgive his many offenses. Princess Rhaenyra was also enamored of her uncle, for Daemon was ever attentive to her. Whenever he crossed the narrow sea upon his dragon, he brought her some exotic gift on his return. The king had grown soft and plump over the years. Viserys never claimed another dragon after Balerion's death, nor did he have much taste for the joust, the hunt, or sword play, or anything that involved getting off his ass. Oh, I added that part. Whereas Daemon excelled in all these spheres and seemed all that his brother was not. Lean and hard, a renowned warrior, dashing, daring, more than a little dangerous. On one point, Mushroom, Septon Eustace, and Grand Maester Runciter, all of our other sources concur, Sir Otto Hightower, the king's hand, took a great dislike to the king's brother. And again, this is Otto Hightower. It was Sir Otto who convinced Viserys to remove Prince Daemon as Master of Coin, and then as Master of Laws, actions that the hand soon came to regret. As commander of the City Watch, with 2,000 men under his command, Daemon waxed more powerful than ever. On no account can Prince Daemon be allowed to ascend to the Iron Throne, the hand wrote his brother, Lord of Oldtown. He would be a second Maegor the Cruel, or worse. And this is a very important moment. Oh, sorry, girl. She's got some new feathers coming in. It's springtime, so you got to be careful. It's a little Cleo yip. So basically what's happening here is that Otto guards his power jealously. Viserys is kind of a doormat. So Otto is really running the thing. And then it comes Daemon. As Daemon gets older, becomes more powerful, he's clearly not anything like his brother. So of course Otto's going to be threatened. Daemon wants to be the heir, and even if he's not the heir, then he's obviously a very powerful character with a powerful dragon. So he writes his brother, the Lord of Oldtown, and says, yeah, under no circumstance can Daemon be allowed to ascend to the Iron Throne. So how did the rest of that letter run? This is the beginning of the plotting, basically. There's when they say under no circumstance, I'm going to get political again. So we just uncovered, this is very comparable to a Donald Trump Jr. email that we just uncovered. This is an email that he sent. So this isn't me opinionating. This is just a fact, okay? Donald Trump Jr. sent an email before the election, and he said to Mark Meadows, who is the chief of staff of the president, Donald Trump, and he said, we have multiple paths to victory. We need to start talking about, how we're going to do it or whatever. And when he says multiple paths to victory, he's saying, even if we don't win the election, there are still ways that we can hold on to power. And that turned out to be the coup attempt on January 6th. So, yeah, oh God, sorry, mods, sorry. But the point is, it's very comparable. And I do think it's interesting to compare political events to things in Game of Thrones. Because here we have, before the election, before Daemon is even coming to power, we've got people saying, we can't let this happen. No matter what, we have to have other plans in place. So even if Viserys were to name Daemon the heir, we've got to, implicit in this message is the idea that we Hightowers, we can't let this happen. We're powerful. So we have to have a plan in place. We need to secure other lines of maintaining control. We need to have a plan for assassinating Daemon, perhaps. We need to figure out, you see what I'm saying here? They need contingencies. And so, and yeah, if you're downvoting me for mentioning that, it's not my fault that your favorite, that the child of your favorite president was sending emails like that. Like, that's not my fault. He sent the email. Downvote him. Sensitive MAGA nation. That's okay though. They're snowflakes. We know that. I'll stop now. I'll stop. So we've got, where are we here? We've got Otto beginning the plotting. And this is the thing. He says this again when they talk about, should we seize power? Should we stick Aegon on the throne? And because remember, Viserys said that Rhaenyra is his official heir. But then when Viserys dies, they're like, yeah, screw that. You know what? We know what the king said. It's like when Cersei holds up Robert's will and she crumples it. She's like, there's your piece of paper. There's your paper shield, Lord Stark. It's a very similar situation, right? So, that person that just downvoted, now they must be on a 60-second delay. That's all right. So we've got essentially these Hightowers. They're getting ready to make these moves. This is like 20 years before Viserys dies, and they're already saying, "Look, we can't let Daemon take power." And this becomes the argument against letting Rhaenyra take power. It's like, oh well, if Rhaenyra is the queen, then Daemon, her prince consort, because they are married at that time, would actually be in charge. Or Daemon as a prince consort would be too close to king for us to tolerate. So we can't do that. So you get into this thing where you're justifying your own bad actions by suspecting that the other team will do something bad if you don't first. And that's a famous rationale used by a lot of bad actors. Okay, so bringing up random stuff about Hunter Biden is not germane to the conversation. See, what I did is I made a political comparison between something in the books and a real world event. So, well, I guess, wait, are you making a, oh, I guess that's an incest. Okay, well, that's valid. If you're bringing it up on account of incest, then I guess that's technically valid. But let's not delve into like digging up your favorite political dirt in order to have a one-upsmanship, because that would be silly and not really appropriate. So I will just throw that caution out. There are probably, but yeah, the ideas of Targaryens having weird, where are the like sex party cults? They've got to be sex party cults somewhere. If there were, Daemon would know about them, right? So I've indulged you. So in the absence, it said, yet his, okay. So he can't be allowed to ascend to the Iron Throne. He would be a second Maegor the Cruel or worse. It was Sir Otto's wish then that Princess Rhaenyra succeed her father, because right here the choices are Rhaenyra or Daemon. So Otto Hightower is so against Daemon that he's like, I'd rather have Rhaenyra. But of course they come up with a better plan, don't they? They marry Alysanne to Viserys. And this is, you can see why people from the beginning have suspected that Alysanne was put in front of Viserys by Otto as a means of holding on to power. So that's definitely, that subplot begins right here. Better the realm's delight than Lord Fleabottom, he wrote, nor was he alone in this opinion. Yet his party faced a formidable hurdle. If the precedent set by the Great Council of 101 was followed, a male claimant must prevail over a female. In the absence of a true-born son, the king's brother would come before the king's daughter, as Balon had come before Rhaenys in 92. And so, we see why I laid out this history at the beginning of the show. The precedents are important. So Balon was named the heir over Rhaenys, and here again they're like, we're in a real bind, because if we follow that precedent, then it's got to be Daemon, and we can't have Daemon. As for the king's own views, the chronicles agreed that King Viserys hated dissension, though far from blind to his brother's flaws. And let me get a little Daemon and Viserys action here. Or just Daemon. We'll go with Lord Fleabottom Daemon. There we go. And by the way, Mark Simonetti on the left, Ricardo Bessa on the right. So though far from blind to his brother's flaws, he cherished his memories of the free-spirited, adventurous boy that Daemon had been. His daughter was his life's great joy, he often said, but a brother is a brother. Time and time again, he strove to make peace between Sir Daemon and Sir Otto, but the enmity between the two men roiled endlessly. What's it say? Oh, someone just took their downvote back. Hey, look at that. Maybe you appreciated my, anyways, let me just move on. So the enmity, he basically Viserys tried to make peace between Otto and Daemon, but it didn't work. The enmity continued. They wore false smiles at court. When pressed on the matter, King Viserys would only say he was certain his queen would soon present him with a son. And in 105 AC, and this is Aemma still, he announced to the court and small council that Queen Aemma was once again with child. And during that same fateful year, Sir Criston Cole was appointed to the Kingsguard. Dun dun dun. That's right, Cleo. Come here, girl. Come here. Good girl. Criston Cole. Ladies' man. LOL, Minty. LOL. So Criston Cole is appointed to the Kingsguard to fill the place created by the death of the legendary Sir Ryan Redwyne. Born the son of a steward in service to Lord Dondarrion of Blackhaven, Sir Criston was a comely young knight of 23, also known as 23. He first came to the attention of the court when he won the melee held at Maidenpool in honor of King Viserys' ascension. In the final moments of the fight, Sir Criston knocked Dark Sister from Daemon's hand with his Morning Star, to the delight of his grace and the fury of the prince.
Afterward, he gave the 7-year-old Princess Rhaenyra the victor's laurel and begged for her favor to wear in the joust. In the lists, he defeated Prince Daemon once again and unhorsed both of the celebrated Cargill twins, Sir Auric and Sir Eric of the Kingsguard, who, by the way, have been cast in the show, Eric and Auric, before falling to Lord Lyman de Mallister. So this picture is probably Criston Cole and Daemon. The person Daemon is fighting is holding a Morning Star, and it looks like it could be Kingsguard armor. So we don't know for sure. But that definitely is Daemon. Well, it's probably Daemon and probably Criston. So there you go. Guys, I need to take a bathroom break real quick. So I'm going to give you some more funky music. Sorry for all the breaks today. Doing my best. But yeah, drank a lot of Red Bull. Be right back. Praise Garth. Let me see the Garth emojis in the chat from my channel squisher members. Channel member squishers. Whatever y'all are called. Can't take time to get the goddamn syntax right when you got squishers breathing down your neck. Mere men killing Prince Aemon. Gotta drive them back into the sea. Damn mermen. All right. So with his pale green eyes, coal black hair, and easy charm, Criston Cole. I think I said, Criston Cole. I might have said the wrong name, but we're talking about Criston Cole. Earlier, that is. So with his pale green eyes, coal black hair, and easy charm, Cole soon became a favorite of all the ladies at court. Not the least amongst them, Rhaenyra Targaryen herself. So smitten was she by the charms of the man she called my White Knight, that Rhaenyra begged her father to name Sir Criston her own personal shield and protector. His grace indulged her in this, as in so much else. Hey, Gabe the Griffin! Whoa, dude, where you been, Gabe? Shit, look, man, I'm in HD. You've been gone so long, I'm in HD. You've got quad box. Welcome, Gabe. So good to see you. Sorry, guys. Just, yeah. You know how it is. The Myth fam sometimes wander away, come back. Things happen. Anyways, yeah, life gets crazy sometimes. But it's great to see you, Gabe the Griffin. All right. So with his pale green eyes, easy charm, favor of all the ladies, Rhaenyra herself, so smitten was Rhaenyra by the charms of the man she called my White Knight, she begged her father to name him her personal shield and protector, which he did. He indulged her in this as in so much else. So again, Viserys, kind of a pushover. Thereafter, Sir Criston always wore Rhaenyra's favor in the lists and became a fixture at her side during the feasts and frolics. Not long after Sir Criston donned his white cloak, King Viserys invited Lionel Strong. And here we're going to do some House Strong, because they don't really fit in anywhere else. Gavin Spokes, been cast as Lionel Strong. Lord of Harrenhal,
to join the small council as Master of Laws. A big man, burly and balding, Lord Strong enjoyed a formidable reputation as a battler. Those who did not know him oft took him for a brute, mistaking his silences and slowness of speech for stupidity. This was far from the truth. Lord Lionel had studied at the Citadel as a youth, earning 6 links of his chain before deciding that a maester's life was not for him, much like Oberyn Martell. He was literate and learned, his knowledge of the laws of the 7 kingdoms exhaustive. Thrice wed and thrice a widower. Wow. The Lord of Harrenhal brought 2 maiden daughters and 2 sons to court with him. The girls became handmaids to Princess Rhaenyra, whilst their elder brother, Sir Harwin Strong, called Breakbones, was made a captain of the Gold Cloaks. And again, here is Harwin, played by Ryan Corr. The younger boy, Larys the Clubfoot, joined the King's Confessors. And this is another character that I can show you, Matthew Needham. This is a very interesting looking fellow. As you can see, he's got kind of a squirrely, comedic look to him. And if you look at the rest of his pictures, it's even worse. This guy is obviously a big character. Like quite the character kind of a dude. So he might be a little bit like, I don't want to directly compare him to Thoros, because Thoros is more comedic and you feel safe with Thoros. You should not feel safe with Larys Strong. But Larys, he is going to be the Whisperer. So he's got an obvious parallel with Varys. Larys and Varys. However, Larys, he's known as the Clubfoot. He's not like Varys. He's a different sort of character. So there might be a little bit of Grima Wormtongue in this character. He might be a little bit like off kilter. Like you wonder if the guy's maybe a little crazy or something. He's probably going to be very wicked. He's the Master of Whisperers, so he might have stuff to do with like torture and things like that. But should be an interesting character, and the casting looks very interesting. So that's Matthew Needham. He's playing Larys Strong, who we'll read about in a second. The story goes away from the Strongs, but comes back to them in just a moment. So thus did matters stand in King's Landing in the year 105, when Queen Emma was brought to bed in Maegor's Holdfast and died whilst giving birth to the son that Viserys Targaryen had desired for so long. The boy, named Balon after the king's father, survived her only by a day. And this is not the picture I wanted. Let me see here. Never mind. I'm going to just keep reading. It's going to change in just a second. So the boy dies as well. They named him Balon. It says, this is important here. Leaving the king and court bereft, save perhaps for Prince Daemon, who was observed in a brothel on the Street of Silk, making drunken japes with his high-born cronies about the heir for a day. And that's the baby who died after a day. When word of this got back to the king, legend says that it was the whore sitting in Daemon's lap who informed on him, but evidence suggests it was actually one of his drinking companions, a captain in the Gold Cloaks, eager for advancement. Viserys became livid. And the latter is a lot more believable, by the way. A sex worker isn't going to go up to the castle and try to turn somebody in. She wouldn't expect to be treated well or believed. However, one of Daemon's captains in the Gold Cloaks trying to advance absolutely would have the motivation and the position to go try to rat out Daemon. But we'll see. We'll see what they do with that on the show. So Viserys becomes livid, of course. He's just lost his wife and his son, and he heard that his brother was making jokes about it. So His Grace had finally had a surfeit of his ungrateful brother and his ambitions. And that would be this ungrateful brother right here. There's Daemon looking kind of surly and ungrateful. So once his mourning for his wife and his son had run its course, the king moved swiftly to resolve the long-simmering issue of the succession. Disregarding the precedent set by Jaehaerys in 92 and the Great Council in 101, Viserys declared his daughter Rhaenyra to be his rightful heir, and named her Princess of Dragonstone. In a lavish ceremony at King's Landing, hundreds of lords did obeisance to the realm's delight, as she sat at her father's feet at the base of the Iron Throne,
swearing to honor and defend her right of succession. So this is obviously a big part of where the trouble starts. And this is the young Rhaenyra, actress, and King Viserys here, obviously. So Prince Daemon was not among them, however, at the foot of the Iron Throne, swearing fealty to Rhaenyra. Because at this point, Rhaenyra has been chosen over him. So he's furious. The prince quit King's Landing, resigning from the City Watch. I quit. And remember, he got ratted out potentially by some other captain in the Watch. So first he went to Dragonstone, taking his paramour Mysaria with him upon the back of his dragon Caraxes. The lean red beast the small folk called the Bloodworm, which is an awesome dragon nickname, potentially the best one. There he remained for half a year, during which time he got Mysaria with child. When he learned that his concubine was pregnant, concubine, we get a nicer title now. Thank you. How nice of you, maesters. Prince Daemon presented her with a dragon's egg, but in this he again went too far and woke his brother's wrath. King Viserys, and remember he's on Dragonstone, so there's plenty of eggs on Dragonstone. King Viserys commanded him to return the egg, send his whore away, and return to his lawful wife, or else be attainted as a traitor, because he's still married to the Royce lady at this point. The prince obeyed, albeit with poor grace, dispatching Mysaria, eggless, back to Lys, whilst he himself flew to Runestone in the Vale, and the unwelcome company of his, quote, bronze bitch. But Mysaria lost her child during a storm on the narrow sea. When word reached Prince Daemon, he spoke no syllable of grief, but his heart hardened against the king, his brother. And see, this is this is where we could have maester propaganda here. How do they know that Daemon spoke no syllable of grief? It's not even said who the source was. So maybe Daemon was very upset. We don't know. We will just have to see in the actual show, when we see these scenes depicted, what kind of a relationship Daemon and Mysaria have. Mysaria to me seems like kind of witchy, especially with that cloak that she has. So I suspect that the link, I think it would be cool if they played up the sorcery angle. Sorry, hold on. Played up the sorcery angle to where, like, you know, Daemon is potentially interested in mysticism and Mysaria is counseling him, maybe sharing a vision that she has or something like that. I want them to have some sort of weird mystical connection, kind of like Aemond One-Eye and Alice Rivers later. I think that would be cool, but we will have to see what they do. So Daemon broods day and night on the succession. He's mad at Viserys. He's lost his firstborn child. And though Princess Rhaenyra had been proclaimed her father's successor, there were many in the realm, at court and beyond it, who still hoped that Viserys might father a male heir. For the young king was not yet 30. Oh, sorry, wrong picture. We're not there yet. We're here. Grand Maester Runstetter was the first to urge his grace to remarry, even suggesting a suitable choice. How about Lady Rhaena Velaryon, who had just turned 12? A fiery young maiden, freshly flowered, Lady Rhaena had inherited the beauty of a true Targaryen from her mother, Rhaenys, and a bold, adventurous spirit from her father, the Sea Snake. As Lord Corlys loved to sail, Rhaena loved to fly, and had claimed for her own no less amount than mighty Vhagar. And we talked about Rhaena in the Velaryon stream, so we don't have to go into detail here. But essentially, the main reason why she's a good candidate is because this would heal the rift between the House Velaryon and House Targaryen, because they've been passed over a couple times now. So by marrying Rhaena to the king, then you're ensuring that the children of Velaryon will become king in their own time. And as I pointed out last time, they're like, oh, she's 12, she's perfect. Like, don't think that they're going to get a 12-year-old girl pregnant. Like, we've just seen the other Targaryen princesses that got pregnant at 16 and 18. The maesters were talking, oh, maybe that was too early. So they're aware that, like, it's not safe or healthy for 13-year-old girls to get pregnant. So when they say she's ideal candidate, they're talking about politics here. And the idea would be to marry her to Viserys, and then, the marriage wouldn't be consummated for some time. So it would be much like Marjorie and Tommen. They were married, but obviously they're not expecting 8-year-old Tommen to, produce an heir right away. So they would wait until the appropriate time and whatever. Basically, as soon as Tommen hit puberty, Marjorie would be sneaking in there. But that's beside the point. Just want to make that point. It's not exactly like it sounds like, oh, they're just going to take this 12-year-old girl and get her knocked up and be like, problem solved. Like, no, they would wait a few years. It's medieval, but it's not that medieval. So, there. And of course, I am not, just adding commentary here. So, it is what it is. Like I said, it's somewhat medieval. Cleo, come here. And as we discussed, there is a less of a concept of childhood in medieval society and in many ancient cultures. As soon as that's why the boys are always like, oh, I'm nearly a man grown, and they're like 10. So basically, as soon as you hit puberty, you're considering yourself a man or a woman, and you're on your way towards killing people with swords, or popping out heirs, or ruling a hold fast, or whatever it is. So kids grow up a little quicker. We have a different concept of childhood in the modern times, but there. I think I've made the point. So he would marry again. So yes, His Grace had his own notion, and no amount of argument would sway him from his course. So Viserys finally gets his back up. He would marry again, yes, but not to a 12-year-old girl, and not for reasons of state. Another woman had caught his eye, and that, of course, is Lady Alicent Hightower, the clever and lovely 18-year-old daughter of the King's Hand, the girl who had read to King Jaehaerys as he lay dying. So, one of the things on the show that'll be interesting to see is the backstory behind the Hightower Viserys thing, the development of the relationship between Alicent and Viserys, because there's a rumor that they slept with each other before Lady Emma died. So that it seems like they have a real thing, but also remember, Otto is scheming to make sure Daemon doesn't get the throne. And so part of that scheme could be encouraging this match. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of relationship Viserys and Otto Hightower have. How much Otto is manipulating Viserys potentially. So yeah, because he put his foot down on this. Well, why did he do that? Maybe Otto Hightower put some stuff in his ear about, the Velaryons or whatever else. So the point is the Hightowers are big manipulators, and we should not think that anything is just happening on its own that involves the Hightowers. We should assume that there's some amount of string pulling that's going on there. So the Hightowers of Old Town, ancient and noble family, as I mentioned, impeccable lineage. There could be no possible objection to the king's choice of bride, but even so, there were those who murmured that the Hand had risen above himself. Because remember, he's been Hand for a long time now, 2 kings. He's going to marry his daughter to the king. So it's like, what are these Hightowers are just taking over the Red Keep, essentially. So yeah, the other houses are going to be jealous. A few even cast doubt on Lady Alicent's virtue, suggesting that she had welcomed King Viserys into her bed before Queen Emma's death. Tut tut. Tut tut, Cleo. These calumnies were never proved, though Mushroom repeats them in his testimony and goes so far as to claim that reading was not the only service Alicent performed to the old king in his bedchamber. Now, Mushroom is probably pro-Rhaenyra, if anything. So that is one thing, is when we hear Mushroom dishing this absolutely vile stuff on the Greens, maybe not. Certainly the part about Alicent and the old king is dubious, but us. So in the Vale, Prince Daemon reportedly whipped the serving man who brought the news to him within an inch of his life. Don't whip the messenger, Prince Daemon. Nor was the sea snake pleased when the word reached Driftmark. House Velaryon had been passed over once again, So Daemon's mad because the High Towers are becoming more powerful, and the Velaryons are mad because Laena has been passed over. Now Laena herself doesn't care. She's 12, and she's like, I like flying more than boys, so she doesn't care. Laena feels a little bit Arya-like, by the way. Not completely, but somewhat. She's not cast out into the wilderness like Arya is, so it's different arc. There's a little bit of that personality, a little bit of that moxie. So when King Viserys took Alysanne to wife, House Velaryon was notable for its absence. Princess Rhaenyra poured for her stepmother, Alysanne, at the feast, and Queen Alysanne kissed her and named her daughter. The princess was among the women who disrobed the king and delivered him to the bedchamber of his bride. Laughter and love and very naughty customs ruled the Red Keep that night, whilst across Blackwater Bay, Lord Corlys the Sea Snake welcomed the king's brother, Prince Daemon, to a war council. The prince had suffered all he could stand of the Vale of Arryn, Runestone, and his lady wife. Dark Sister was made for nobler tasks than slaughtering sheep. She has a thirst for blood. But it was not rebellion that they had in mind, and this is the whole Stepstones thing. I skipped over this last time, so here we're gonna do this. We're gonna read this war for the Stepstones. This is something that they're gonna have in season 1. We've heard that there's naval battle stuff happening, and that's almost certainly the war for the Stepstones. How could you not? Also, it's definitely exactly disrobing your dad at his wedding, right? That's what I was like, oh, okay, I guess it's Targaryen, but yeah, he's just like, oh, and everything was happy. Okay, the betting custom is hella weird though. I have a hard time picturing that ever happening in real life. Like it's a weird thing. I don't know where George freaking got that, man. Anyways, so the Stepstones, the chain of rocky islands between Dorne and the disputed lands of Essos, had long been a haunt of outlaws, exiles, wreckers, and pirates. Let me get some Daemon back on here. Of themselves, the isles were of little worth, but placed as they were, they controlled the sea lanes to and from the narrow sea, and merchant ships passing through those waters were often preyed on by their inhabitants. Still, for centuries, such depredations had remained no more than a nuisance. 10 years earlier, however, the free cities of Lys, Myr, and Tyrosh had put aside their ancient enmities to make common cause in a war against Volantis. After defeating the Volantines in the Battle of the Borderland, the 3 victorious cities had entered into an eternal alliance, quote-unquote, and formed a strong new power, the Triarchy, better known in Westeros as the Kingdom of the 3 Daughters, as each of the free cities considered itself a daughter of Valyria of old. Or more rudely, the Kingdom of the 3 Whores, because we've got to use that word as many times as possible, apparently. Though this kingdom was without a king, being governed by a council of 33 magisters, a.k.a. Freemasons, because there's 33 levels to Freemasonry. They only tell you 32, but there's a 33rd. Don't believe them. So once Volantis sued for peace and withdrew from the disputed lands, the 3 daughters had turned their gaze westward, sweeping over the Stepstones with their combined armies and fleets under the command of a Myrish prince, Admiral Cragus Drahar, who earned the sobriquet Cragus Crab Feeder when he staked out hundreds of captured pirates on the wet sands to drown beneath the rising tide. Arr! A horrible death for a pirate. Horrible. Staked out to drown on the morning tide. Despicable. So the conquest and annexation of the Stepstones by the Kingdom of the 3 Daughters at first was met with only approval from the Lords of Westeros. Order had replaced chaos, and if the 3 Daughters demanded a toll of any ship passing through their waters, well, that seemed a small price to pay to be rid of the pirates. The avarice of Cragus Crabfeeder and his partners in conquest soon turned feelings against them, however. The toll was raised again and yet again, soon becoming so ruinous that merchants who had once paid gladly now sought to slip past the galleys of the Triarchy, as once they had the pirates. So the lords have become the pirates. And really, what is a toll taker other than a pirate? So, let's see here. So Jaehaerys Alysanne and Tyroshi co-admirals seemed to be vying with each other to see who was the greediest. The Alysanne became especially loathed, for they claimed more than coin from the passing ships, taking off women, girls, and comely young boys to serve in their pleasure gardens and pillow houses. Amongst those thus enslaved was Lady Joanna Swan, a 15-year-old niece of the Lord of Stonehelm. When her infamously stingy uncle refused to pay the ransom, she was sold to a pillow house, where she rose to become the celebrated courtesan known as the Black Swan, and ruler of Lys in all but name. Alas, her tale, however fascinating, has no bearing on our present history. Of all the lords of Westeros, none suffered so much from these practices as Corlys Velaryon, Lord of the Tides, whose fleets had made him as wealthy and powerful as any man in the Seven Kingdoms. The Sea Snake was determined to put an end to the Triarchy's rule over the Stepstones, and in Daemon he had found a willing partner, eager for gold and glory in victory, that victory in war would bring him. Shunning the king's wedding, they laid their plans in high tide on the Isle of Driftmark. Lord Velaryon would command the fleet, Prince Daemon the army. They would be greatly outnumbered by the forces of the three daughters, but the prince would also bring to battle the fires of his dragon, Caraxes the Bloodworm, whom you can see on the screen. It's not our purpose here to recount the details of the private war Daemon and Corlys waged on the Stepstones. Suffice it to say that the fighting began in 106. Prince Daemon had little difficulty assembling an army of landless adventurers and second sons, and won many victories during the first 2 years of the conflict. In 108 AC, when at last he came face to face with Cragus Crabfeeder, he slew him single-handed and cut off his head with Dark Sister, which is this picture by Doug Wheatley. And you'd have to tell me if that's a Black Swan reference. I can't think of what the corollary would be, but it's not our I read that, sorry. King Viserys, doubtless pleased to be rid of his troublesome brother, supported his efforts with regular infusions of gold, and by 109, Daemon Targaryen and his army of sellswords and cutthroats controlled all but 2 of the islands, and the Snee Snake's fleets, that's him, Snee Snake, had taken firm control of the waters between. During this brief moment of victory, Prince Daemon himself declared himself king of the Stepstones and the Narrow Sea, and Lord Corlys placed a crown on his head. But their kingdom was far from secure. The next year, the kingdom of the three daughters dispatched a fresh invasion force under the command of a devious Tyroshi captain named Racalio Rindoon. Surely one of the most curious and flamboyant rogues in the annals of history, and Dorne joined the war in alliance with the Triarchy. Fighting resumed. Though the Stepstones were engulfed in blood and fire, King Viserys and his court remained unperturbed. Let Daemon play at war, his grace is reported to have said. It keeps him out of trouble. Viserys was a man of peace, and during these years King's Landing was an endless round of feasts, balls, and tourneys, where mummers and singers heralded the birth of each new Targaryen princeling. And Alicent starts having kids here. 107, she has Aegon. Helena in 110. Princess Rhaenyra still hanging around. She has eyes only for Criston Cole. The enmity between her grace and stepdaughter is short-lived. Both Rhaenyra and Alicent aspired to be the first lady of the realm. And though the queen had given the king not one but 2 male heirs, Viserys had done nothing to change the order of succession. So this is when it gets really awkward. When he leaves Rhaenyra as the heir, but then goes on to sire 2 more sons with his new wife, and then just lets it ride. Just lets it ride. So that's Viserys. Yeah. King asleep at the wheel. Still questions persisted, not the least from Alicent herself. Loudest amongst her supporters was her father, Otto Hightower. Pushed too far on the matter in 109, Viserys stripped Sir Otto of his chain of office and named in his place the taciturn Lord of Harrenhal, Lionel Strong. This hand will not hector me, his grace proclaimed. So here's the thing. Otto Hightower is now going to be a dangerous enemy. Was powerful. He's now fallen from power, but he's going to come back around, and he's going to be even more bitter. So this is probably an important moment that they'll depict in season 1. And yes. So we're 2 hours and 20 minutes into the stream here. I'm looking for where exactly I'm going to wrap it up. I copied a bunch of my notes, kind of extra notes here, knowing that I would skim through some of these. But essentially what's going on here is that this tension just keeps building up at court. And even after Sir Otto returns to Old Town, there's still a Queen's party at court, which is the Hightower faction. A group of powerful lords friendly to Alicent and supportive of the rights of her sons. Against them was pitted the party of the princess. Viserys loved both his wife and daughter and hated the conflict. He tried to keep his peace with gifts and gold and honors. But that's, so long as he lived and ruled and kept the balance, that's great. The feasts and tourneys continued. But everyone is, still just waiting. All the tensions are seething under the surface. And says, though there were some sharp-eyed who observed the dragons of one party snapping and spitting flame at the dragons of the other party whenever they chanced to pass near each other. So the dragons absorb the feelings of their riders. We've seen this before. When Dany is horny or having sex, Drogon gets excited too, right? When Dany is angry, the dragons hiss and get angry. And so here we see the same thing. Remember, Jaehaerys and Alysanne were married. Their dragons, Silverwing and Vermithor, they acted as though they were married too. They curled up with each other when they slept. So there's something to that. And what's interesting is that earlier I mentioned Balon and Alyssa, the parents of Viserys and Daemon. Balon and Alyssa, Balon flies Vhagar, and Alyssa flies Caraxes. Right? Or do I have that? I'm sorry. Let me just double check. We'll go back up to the top of the notes. That's where I can check. It's Melee's. Okay. Well, okay, so I guess my point was when Aemon Targaryen and Balon Targaryen were alive. Sorry, forget everything I said for 30 seconds. Starting over. Aemon and Balon, the two brother princes. Aemon rides Caraxes. Balon rides Vhagar, whichever you prefer. And the thing is that later in the dance, those two dragons will fight each other, right? When it's Daemon and Aemon. So presumably, the two dragons were friendly when they were ridden by these two brothers who were best bros. But then later, they fight when they have owners there at odds. So I think that's kind of interesting. But let me get back to where we were here. So even the dragons understand the rivalry. Yeah, okay, there's one more thing I definitely need to read here. So there's the Queen's party. In 111, they have the tourney at King's Landing where the Queen wears green, the princess wears black, the Targaryen colors, and people start calling them the blacks and the greens. The greens being the Hightower Alicent party and the blacks being Rhaenyra's party. Let's see here. There's a tourney where Criston Cole, wearing Prince Rhaenyra's favor, unhorsed all of the Queen's champions, including Gwaine Hightower, Alicent's cousin. But then Daemon shows up. He returns to court. And it says, wearing a crown and styling himself King of the Narrow Sea, he appeared unannounced in the skies above King's Landing on his dragon, circling thrice above the tourney grounds. Let me give you some Daemon here. But when at last he came to earth, he knelt before his brother and offered up his crown as a token of love and fealty. Viserys returned the crown and kissed Daemon on both cheeks, welcoming him home, and the lords and commons set up a thunderous cheer as the sons of the Spring Prince were reconciled. Amongst those cheering loudest was Rhaenyra, who was thrilled at the return of her favorite uncle and begged him to stay a while. This much is known. As to what happened afterward, here we must look to our more dubious chroniclers. Prince Daemon did remain at King's Landing for half a year. That's beyond dispute. He even resumed his seat on the council, but neither age nor exile had changed his nature. Daemon soon began to take up with his old companions. Let's see. Lost my place, sorry. From the Gold Cloaks, and returned to the establishments on the Streaks of Silk, where he had been such a valued patron. Those are the sex worker places. Though he treated Queen Alysanne with all the courtesy due her station, there was no warmth, and men said the prince was notably cool towards her children, especially his nephews, Aegon and Aemond, whose birth had pushed him still lower in the order of succession. Rhaenyra was a different matter. Daemon spent long hours in her company, enthralling her with tales of his journeys and battles. He gave her pearls and silks and books, and a jade tiara said once to have belonged to the Empress of Lang. That's a cool bit of trivia. I mean, wow. A jade tiara of the Empress of Lang. And by the way, I've got some new Lang artwork that I found just the other day. This is by Drafturgy. I'm just going to put it up here real quick over top so we can see. So there's Lang, there's with the huge apes and the tigers. There you go. So Rhaenyra was given a jade tiara of the Empress of Lang, which is probably some Nissa Nissa, Child of the Forest symbolism, but we're not doing symbolism really today. So Daemon's giving her gifts, dines with her, hawked with her, sailed with her, entertained her by making mock of the greens at court, the lickspittles fawning over Queen Alysanne and her children. He praised her beauty, declaring her to be the fairest maid in all the 7 kingdoms. Uncle and niece began to fly together almost daily, racing Syrax and Caraxes to Dragonstone and back. Let me see if I can find a different picture that I want to show. Well, I've got it here. It's this picture. What's wrong, girl? What's the matter? Come here. Hey, come here. One second. Step down, girl. It's okay. All right, so let's see here. Where were we? There's a good girl. So they're flying, yes. Flying and racing Caraxes and Syrax. It's very wholesome uncle-niece activity here. This is where our sources diverge. Grand Maester Runsetter says only that the brothers quarreled again and Prince Daemon departed King's Landing to return to the Stepstones and his wars. Of the cause of the quarrel he does not speak. Others assert that it was at Queen Alysanne's urging that Viserys sent Daemon away. But Septon Eustace and Mushroom tell another tale, or rather, 2 such tales, each different from the other. Eustace, the less salacious of the two, writes that Prince Daemon seduced his niece, the princess, and claimed her maidenhood. When the lovers were discovered abed together by Sir Arik Cargill of the Kingsguard and brought before the king, Rhaenyra insisted she was in love with her uncle and pleaded with her father for leave to marry him. King Viserys would not hear of it, however, and reminded his daughter that Prince Daemon already had a wife. In his wrath, he confined his daughter to her chambers, told his brother to depart, and commanded both of them never to speak of what had happened. However, Mushroom has a different story. It's far more depraved, as is often the case with his testimony. According to the dwarf, and Testimonies, the book he wrote, according to the dwarf, it was Criston Cole that the princess yearned for, not Prince Daemon. But Sir Criston was a true knight, noble and chaste, and mindful of his vows. And though he was in her company day and night, he had never so much as kissed her, nor made any declaration of his love. When he looks at you, he sees the little girl you were, not the woman you've become, Daemon told his niece. But I can teach you how to make him see you as a woman. So here comes the creepy part. I need a half funky Game of Thrones theme song break here, so enjoy like the first verse of this, and I'll be right back. Oh, it did a little fade out. I was worried it was just going to hard cut. It did a nice little fade out. There you go. That was half the funk. Ah, it's much better. All right. Hopefully nobody saw how many unread emails I have. Ooh, hot girls and boys, 18 plus video chat. Oh man. You know, I would never know where to find porn if not for these spam accounts that occasionally turn up in the chat. I mean, gosh, porn is just so hard to find on the internet. All right. So in any case, Daemon began by giving Rhaenyra kissing lessons, if Mushroom can be believed. From there, the prince went on to show, we're going to get the detail. The prince went on to show his niece how best to touch a man to bring him to pleasure, an exercise that sometimes involved Mushroom himself and his alleged enormous member. I'm guessing Mushroom's the one who alleged that. Oh, that's right. This is Mushroom's version of the story, yes. Daemon taught the girl to disrobe enticingly, suckled at her teats to make them larger and more sensitive. That's not scientific. Yeah. And flew with her on dragonback to lonely rocks in Blackwater Bay, where they could disport naked all day unobserved. And there's that word disport again. Apparently it is not only for gay lovemaking. Hetero lovemaking can also be disporting. So they went, yes, all day unobserved, and the princess could practice the arts of pleasuring a man with her mouth. At night, he would smuggle her from her rooms dressed as a page boy and take her secretly to brothels on the Street of Silk, where the princess could observe men and women in the act of love and learn more of these womanly arts from the harlots of King's Landing. Just how long these lessons continued, Mushroom does not say. But unlike Septon Eustace, he insists that Princess Rhaenyra remained a maiden, for she wished to preserve her innocence as a gift for her beloved. But when at last she approached her white knight, using all she had learned, Sir Criston was horrified and spurned her. So maybe disporting means like hanky-panky that isn't lovemaking. Maybe that's what disporting means. It means hanky-panky. I so decree it. When at last she approached her white knight, using all she had learned, Sir Criston was horrified and spurned her. Where's Criston? This I have a hard time believing. But maybe Criston Cole is... Maybe he's like angry incel. Like maybe he takes his vows seriously and really is not, like he's really handsome and all the ladies are gaga over him, but he actually isn't interested in sleeping with any of them. That would be a twist. Mostly we get Kingsguard who want to sleep with all the ladies. But maybe Criston really is
sworn to chastity and then gets angry at Rhaenyra for doing it. And then like he's hateful and like he's like the hateful virgin character. Maybe. Could be the angry incel vibes. But in any case, Mushroom says he spurned her. The whole tale soon came out, in no small part thanks to Mushroom himself. Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. King Viserys at first refused to believe a word of it until Prince Daemon confirmed the tale was true. Give me the girl to wife, he purportedly told his brother. Who else would take her now? Damn, dude. So, if that's true, this is going to be like definitely a high point of drama here. This will be an interesting thing to see what the show does with this. And I've said that one of the interesting things about the show is that George has given them the range of options with some of these things. Maybe it was this, or maybe it was that, or somewhere in between. So the writers of the show can portray this any way they want to, and it'll still be in keeping with the canon. So we'll have to see what they do with this. It's kind of... I'm not sure. It really seems like Daemon and Rhaenyra have a thing for each other. So this whole story about Daemon teaching her how to seduce Kristen Cole, I don't know about that. I'm a little skeptical on that, I would say. Let me know in the chat what you think. What you think is the truth here. Do you think that Daemon was trying to teach Rhaenyra how to seduce Kristen Cole, or did Daemon and Rhaenyra just have a thing? Either one could explain Viserys sending Daemon away. So let me know what you think. And that's a hell of a thing, if so, for Daemon to be like, oh, well, now that she's spoiled, give her to me. That's pretty fucked up argument to make, quite frankly. Yeah. Of the aftermath, these things are certain. Daemon Targaryen returned to the Stepstones and resumed his struggle for those barren, storm-swept rocks. Grand Maester Runciter and Sir Harold Westerling both died in 112 AC. And they've cast someone for Harold Westerling, so I'm not sure if maybe they're going to play up that role a little bit, because he doesn't really do a whole lot. But they cast him, so... Sir Kristen Cole was named as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard in Sir Harold's place, and the Archmaesters of the Citadel sent Maester Mellos to the Red Keep to take up the Grand Maester's chain and duties. So here's an interesting observation. Viserys must have believed not the Mushroom story. He must have believed the story that it was that it was just a Daemon Rhaenyra affair that got caught. Because if it was the Mushroom story, well, I guess Kristen is still like, if he refused Rhaenyra, I guess he could still get promoted. The point is that Kristen comes off blameless in this whole thing. He gets promoted to Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, so sorry if I said that confusingly, but yeah, that's the point. Kristen is in no way implicated in this whole Rhaenyra thing. So, yeah, I mean, the most creepy one is that Daemon is actually grooming Rhaenyra under the pretense of helping her seduce Kristen, but Daemon's real intent is to groom Rhaenyra for himself. That could definitely be what's happening too. And that's something that seems like Daemon would be capable of doing as well. So there's a dark story here somehow. We'll just have to see again how they choose to portray it. So the Archmaesters of the Citadel send Maester Mellos to the Red Keep to take up the Grand Maester's chain and duties. And Maester Mellos also has been cast in the show, so he'll be appearing. And I'm wondering, disport equals third base. Yeah, I think that's what it means, yeah. I think that we should keep an eye on the Maesters. In fact, we may do a live stream to talk about the Maesters. The Maesters there's a lot to say about the role of the Maesters, and this Dance of the Dragons is the high point of the conspiracy theories about the Maesters. Their ostensible goal would be to provoke the Civil War so that the dragons die off and the Targaryens die out. That could be the angle. But yeah, we'll do a whole stream about the Maester conspiracy part of all this. The fact that they've cast a lot of high towers and Maesters and things, characters like that, it means that all this scheming is going to be a part of it. Also, all three Strongs are involved. So there's lots of Lots of King's Landing scheming that'll be happening. So elsewise, King's Landing returned to tranquility for 2 years until 113, when Rhaenyra turned 16, took possession of Dragonstone, and married. And of course, she marries Laenor, as we read last time. And many people vie for her hand. People get in fights. Queen Alicent proposes her eldest son, Aegon, Rhaenyra's half-brother. But Aegon was a boy, the princess 10 years his elder. Moreover, the two half-siblings had never gotten on well. All the more reason to bind them together in marriage, the queen argued. Viserys did not agree. The boy is Alicent's own blood, he told Lord Strong. She wants him on the throne. So here we see Viserys is not blind to the Hightower ambition. So there could be a little bit of a rift opening up in their marriage, hard to say. Definitely seems like Alicent is more loyal to Hightowers than Viserys, probably. But this is interesting. Of course, Aegon and Rhaenyra will become the two contestants for the throne in the Civil War. So they almost got married to each other. And that may have headed off the Civil War, but they did not do that. And instead, it was Laenor. And let me show, I've got that here. So it was Rhaenyra and Laenor that got married. But again, they both have other interests. So I read that last time. Let me skip over. Rhaenyra doesn't want to marry Laenor, but she agrees to because Viserys threatens to make Aegon the heir instead of her. Here again, our sources differ. That night, and this is right before she's to be married, Septon Eustace reports Criston Cole slipped into the princess's bedchamber to confess his love for her, which is weird. So did he... Now, all of a sudden, Criston Cole, who refused Rhaenyra earlier, now he's throwing himself at her. They would be wed in Tyrosh, Old Volantis, where her father's writ did not run, he said, and no one would care that Criston had betrayed his vows as a member of the Kingsguard. His prowess with sword and Morningstar was such that he did not doubt he could find some merchant prince to take him into service. But Rhaenyra refused him. She was the blood of the dragon, she reminded him, and meant for more than to live out her life as the wife of a common sellsword. And if he could set aside his Kingsguard vows, why would marriage vows mean any more to him? Mushroom tells a different tale. In his version, it was Rhaenyra who went to Criston. She found him alone in the White Sword Tower, barred the door, slipped off her cloak to reveal her nakedness underneath. I saved my maidenhead for you, she told him. Take it now as proof of my love. It will mean little unless to my betrothed, and perhaps when he learns I am not chaste, he will refuse me. Yet for all her beauty, her entreaties fell on deaf ears, for Criston was a man of honor and true to his vows. Even when Rhaenyra used the arts she had learned from her uncle Daemon, Cole would not be swayed. Scorned and furious, the princess donned her cloak again and swept out into the night, where she chanced to encounter Sir Harwin Strong, returning from a night of revelry in the stews of the city. This really sounds like just a story made up to slander Rhaenyra at this point. Like, oh, she threw herself at Criston Cole, and then he turned her down, and then she just wandered out into the street and wandered into Harwin Strong, who was drunk, and then he took advantage of Rhaenyra's innocence, shedding her maiden's blood upon the sword of his manhood. That's what it says, according to Mushroom, who claims to have found them in bed at break of day. So, yeah, that's a little... I don't know about that. She threw herself at one guy and then went and slept with another guy on the same night. I mean, maybe, but that definitely seems like a story that's meant to slander her. So, again, we'll have to see how this plays out. Also, there's a little bit of inconsistency here. You know, I mean, it could be consistent if Criston refused her both times. But we do have to wonder. We've got two of these stories that are like, whoa, we don't know. And Criston and Rhaenyra are involved in both. So it says that so then Harwin supposedly took Rhaenyra's innocence,
And however it happened, whether the princess scorned the knight or he her, from that day forward, the love that Criston Cole had formerly borne for Rhaenyra had turned to loathing and disdain. And the man had hitherto been the princess's constant companion and champion became the most bitter of foes. So something did happen. Something happened between Criston Cole and Rhaenyra. We just don't know what it was. So it would be interesting. What if Criston Cole, the first time, really did refuse Rhaenyra, but this time he's weakened and he's thought about that moment, and now that Rhaenyra is about to be married, he actually did throw himself at Rhaenyra, and she refused him. This could cause a self-loathing complex with Criston, because all this time, and while we're talking about Criston, let me put him back on the screen so we're not confused. Think about it. He's been chased. He's kept his vows. Rhaenyra tries to seduce him. He refused her. Daemon was punished. He's head of the Kingsguard. A few years go by. Now, exactly, yeah. Now, maybe he's regretted it all, and he's like, I should have, been thinking about, she's so beautiful, and I should have taken her up, and now she's going to be married against her will, and I should go do the romantic, because it's so over the top for him to go and say, let's go run away and be sellsword captains. But that could be believable because he's swinging from one extreme to the other, essentially, of being sworn to chastity, refusing everything, to like, let's go run away. That's a believable thing. Now, if Rhaenyra turns him down, he would then hate himself for crumbling and being weak and throwing himself at her. And he's got the rejection complex. So this really could turn to hatred. Now, if it's Rhaenyra that's thrown herself at him twice, it could be that he just basically finds her loathsome and disgusting. And so he loses respect for her. But there really seems to be some heat to Criston Cole's dislike of Rhaenyra at this point. So I'm guessing, I think I'm going to put myself down for Daemon did train her. She did try to seduce Criston. Criston rejected her the first time. Then the second time, Criston threw himself at Rhaenyra and Rhaenyra rejected him. That is how I predict it will go down. But let me know in the chat and in the comments. This is going to be a major plot line in this first season, because this is, after this, Harwin Strong becomes Rhaenyra's sworn sword, and Criston Cole becomes the champion of the Greens. So this is a major realignment here. And of course, it's unrealistic to think the princess would leave her birthright. Yeah, so to me, that's what I think. But it's fun to guess, and that's kind of the fun thing about Fire and Blood, is if you slow down like we're doing here and go over the text little by little, take the time to make the characters real in your mind, so it's not just a bunch of names, you can see the potential for drama here. So this is definitely going to be a thing. I see a question in the chat. Do you think Rhaenyra and Laenor hated each other? No, I don't, because Rhaenyra and Daemon and Laenor and Laena Velaryon were all friends, and they all rode their dragons together. So I have to think that Laenor was in the group too. And, Rhaenyra and Laenor have no reason to hate each other. They both like other people. So they just have a political marriage, and they both have, secret boyfriends, basically. So that's very common in medieval times, something like that. And yes, good point, Kyle. George does write a lot about unrequited love. He has an unrequited love story in his background. And that is something that he seems to take inspiration from quite a bit. All right. So yeah, open relationship vibes, I think. And it makes more sense with Rhaenyra and Daemon being tight with all the Velaryons. That just makes sense. There's no real reason for Laenor and Rhaenyra to have dislike. So yeah. Let's see here. So yeah, that's the realignment. Rhaenyra sets sail for Driftmark, accompanied by her handmaids and Sir Harwin, the Fool Mushroom, and takes to husband Laenor. That's when Criston Cole injures a bunch of people, including Harwin, mortally wounds Joffrey Lonmouth, who's Laenor's boyfriend. Viserys is unhappy about it, but Alicent makes Criston Cole her personal protector. So again, the enmity is really thick now. The hatred is hardening. The sides are hardening. And it says, Laenor returned to Driftmark while the princess remained at court in King's Landing. Sir Criston Cole was not among her admirers and friends, having gone over to the Greens, but the massive and redoubtable Breakbones filled his place, becoming foremost of the Blacks. And Prince Laenor prefers the comforts of High Tide, where he has a new favorite, Carl Corey, who eventually will kill Laenor. And in case you didn't catch my correction, in the why House of the Dragon will be better video, I mistakenly identified what looks like Laenor and Carl Corey sword fighting as Aemond and sword fighting. So that was wrong. It's not Aemond One Eye. That's Carl and Laenor. So Laenor joins his wife for important events. And again, we read this in the Velaryon stream. Eustace says they shared a bed no more than a dozen times. Mushroom concurs, but says, oh yeah, all three of them, Carl Corey and Laenor and Rhaena, would all do things in there. Yeah, sure. Other people say that Rhaena would just go and see Harwin Strong on those nights. So then essentially what happens is Rhea Royce dies in the Vale, and Daemon is freed up. And he then marries Laena. And there are whispers that maybe there is foul play involved in that death. So we'll have to see how they handle that. We read about the marriage to Laena between Daemon. They may have been in love. It's hard to say. But they get married and they go on a tour of Essos, if you remember. And in Pentos, they figure out that Laena's pregnant. And so they stop there to give birth. And that would be Baela and Rhaena. And Viserys is happy at the brown-haired, strong boys of Rhaenyra. He thinks that's great. More kids are born. The whispers are growing louder. Daemon comes back to court with his kids. And it says childbirth exacted a heavy toll on the princess. The weight that Rhaenyra gained never entirely left. By the time her youngest boy was born, she had grown stout and thick of waist. And again, I said that she had 3 kids in 4 years, so that's pretty rough. And then she has 3 more with Daemon, too. So by the end of the story, she's had 6 kids, one of whom was miscarried, obviously. As she resents Alicent, who remains slender. And this is the part where Rhaena and Laena become friends. So Daemon is married to Laena. Rhaenyra is married to Laenor. But then in 120, Laenor and Laena both die. And that's when Daemon and Rhaenyra marry. In secret. On Dragonstone. And that's basically where the shit hits the fan. So I had a little more about Harrenhal here. Actually, let me go ahead and read this. I will read this, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So, though Viserys I would reign for 9 more years, the bloody seeds of the dance had already been planted, and by 120, and 120 was the year they began to sprout. Next to perish were the elder Strongs. Lionel Strong, Lord of Harrenhal and Hand of the King, accompanied his son and heir, Sir Harwin, Rhaenyra's boyfriend, on his return to the great half-ruined castle on the lakeshore. That's Harrenhal. Shortly after their arrival, a fire broke out in the tower where they were sleeping, and both father and son were killed, along with 3 of their retainers and a dozen servants. The cause of the fire was never determined. Some put it down to simple mischance, while others muttered that Black Heron's seat was cursed. Many suspected the blaze was set intentionally Mushrooms suggest that the sea snake was behind it, as an act of vengeance against the man who had cuckolded his son. That seems unlikely. Septon Eustace more plausibly suggests Prince Daemon, removing a rival for Princess Rhaenyra's affections, Harwin Strong. Others have put forth the notion that Larys Clubfoot might have been responsible. With his father and elder brother dead, Larys Strong became the Lord of Harrenhal. The most disturbing possibility was advanced by none other than Grand Maester Mellos, who muses that the king himself might have given the command. If Viserys had come to accept that the rumors about the parentage of Rhaenyra's children were true, he might have wished to remove the man who had dishonored his daughter, lest he reveal the bastardy of her sons. Were that so, Lionel Strong's death was an unfortunate accident, for his lordship's decision to see his son back to Harrenhal had been unforeseen. Because, you see, Lord Strong had been the king's hand, and Viserys had come to rely upon his strength and counsel. His grace had reached the age of 43, also known as 43, and had grown quite stout. He no longer had a young man's vigor, and was afflicted by gout, aching joints, back pain, and tightness in the chest that came and went, and oft left him feeling red-faced and short of breath. The governance of the realm was a daunting task. The king needed a strong, capable hand to shoulder some of his burdens. Briefly, he considered sending for Princess Rhaenyra. Who better to rule with him than the daughter he meant to succeed him? But that would have meant bringing the princess and her sons back to King's Landing, where more conflict with the queen and her own brood would have been inevitable. He considered his brother, until he recalled Prince Daemon's previous stints on the small council. So he considered Daemon until he remembered what Daemon was like. Grand Maester Mellos suggested bringing in some younger man, and put forward several names, but his grace chose familiarity and recalled to court Otto Hightower, the queen's father, who had filled the office before for both Viserys and the old king. Yet as soon as Otto gets to the Red Keep, they learn that Rhaenyra has married Prince Daemon. And everyone is outraged. Neither Daemon's wife nor Rhaenyra's husband had been dead even half a year. To wed again so soon was an insult to their memory, his grace declared angrily. The marriage had been performed on Dragonstone, suddenly and secretly. And let me go back to some Daemon and Rhaenyra here. Hang on. There we go. Septon Eustace claims that Rhaenyra knew her father would never approve of the match, so she wed in haste to make certain he could not prevent the marriage. Mushroom puts forward a different reason. The princess was with child and did not want to birth a bastard. And so that dreadful year 120 ended as it had began, with a woman laboring in childbirth. Princess Rhaenyra's pregnancy had a happier outcome than Lady Rhaenyra's had. As the year waned, she brought forth a small but robust son, a pale princeling with dark purple eyes and pale, silvery hair. She named him Aegon. Prince Daemon had at last a living son of his own blood, and this new prince, unlike his 3 half-brothers, was plainly a Targaryen. In King's Landing, Queen Alicent grew wroth when she learned that the babe was named Aegon, taking it for a slight against her own Aegon, which it most certainly was. Hereafter, never mind. So by all rights, 122 should have been a year that was a joyous one for House Targaryen. Rhaenyra gives birth to Daemon's second son, Viserys. And the dragon's egg placed in his cradle never hatched. The Greens took that for an ill omen and were not shy about saying as much. So, and that's the Aegon that will become Aegon III, that will become the king. So, and Viserys will also become king. Kind of a regent king, but he is a king. So, there you go. That is your House Targaryen stream. It was a long stream. It was, how long has it been? It's been, how long has it been, sir? 3 days. 2.5 hours. But now you're prepared. Now you know everything there is to know about these elder Targaryens. And so you're more prepared for the stream. But like I said, I've got action coming for you this week. So either Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on when I finish, look for Meet the Dragons. Make sure you're subscribed so you get the notification. And if you would care to leave a comment on this video as soon as the stream is over, click the refresh button. Click the refresh. I need a refresh button. I've got one. Click the refresh button on your browser. Leave a comment. That will help the video get seen by more people. And like I said, next Sunday, Targaryen trivia for Easter. Don't miss that. Hosted by Reading Rhaegar. So I'll see you on Tuesday or Wednesday with a new video, and next Sunday with a stream. And with that, I will say thank you and have yourself a great Sunday. Go Warriors.